I'll call the meeting to order, the Franklin County Board of Supervisors, Tuesday, April 1st, 2020. And for those attending online and phone, we'd like to welcome you, and glad that we could make this available. Carter, would you give a...
Yes, sir. Let us stand. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for this day. We ask that you hold all the people affected by this virus in the palm of your hand. We ask for your healing strength through these troubling times. We ask for your divine guidance and wisdom, and help this board make the correct decisions. We ask for all these things in his name we pray. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
The first item of business is our consent agenda. And we're open for comments or
Chairman, on two. There's gonna be much discussion on it today.
Yes, Chairman, if item 2 really is a part of Sandy's presentation later this afternoon. So if it's the pleasure of the board, item 2 maybe can fall under Steve Sandy's action this afternoon. Again, that's the pleasure of the board.
Sounds good.
And then secondly, I'll mention on item number 1, the monopole tower there at Sontag Park. On that specific one, it's a request, of course, to utilize Sontag Park for that property. The specific location, while now shows around the ball field, there may be modification if that specific location in the park is not feasible. It may be somewhere else in the park, on the parkland there. So I just wanted to point that out. I think it's fine the way it is written, and if the board approves that today, that's fine. But just want to make sure the board's aware, that specific area could change as to where that may be finalized. So
it's not set in stone what it's going to be in the park.
It is set in stone that it'll be in the park. It's just the specific.
I mean, the location.
The location. That's right. It could change some. So.
Okay.
and that'll do to propagation where they feel like is the best spot.
That's right. And any other restrictions that may be that would limit it on the property.
And I think Blue Ridge Tower will take the initiative on that.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Or BrisNet, which they want to call it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'll take a motion with number 2 being held for, I guess it'll be contingent on how we follow with the presentation later on. And could we just go ahead and not approve it contingent on what we?
I would just pull it.
Just pull it? Okay. Number 2 is pulled. Any thoughts on the rest of it?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we go ahead and approve the remaining items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion? Madam Chairman, we'll have Madam Clerk, we'll have a roll call.
Okay, just to make sure that I have this motion properly, Mr. Tatum made a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item number 2. And are we placing item number 2 under Steve Sandy's short-term, okay, short-term, let's see how it is, rental registry? Okay, so that was a motion made by Tim Tatum and seconded by Tommy Cundiff.
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Cundiff?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum?
Yes.
Chairman Mitchell?
Yes. And Madam Clerk, you will notify us when Mr. Thompson is on the line. Thank you. Todd Daniels.
And we're a few minutes early than his item on the agenda, so I'm not sure if he has.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm on if you can hear me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Daniels. Yes, sir, we can hear you fine.
Very good, very good. So, a little unique way of presenting. I was, Brian Casella's on and Lisa Lewis are on as well. We were joking back and forth about our attire presenting to the board. So, no tie today, but I do have a collared shirt on. I felt that appropriate to present remotely. I've got 3 items on the agenda for us today. Give you a brief update to start off with, and you should have that in your packet. Various pipe replacements and pipe repair is basically what we've been working on as our bigger projects for the last 30 days, and moving forward as well. We've still got several underway and several that we will continue to work on. In between all of that, our area headquarters are also we're doing quite a bit of patching. We've started up patching our secondary roads in preparation for our maintenance overlays, slurry seal, surface treatment, plant mix, what have you, for this summer season. Some of that actually may get underway as early as late April. The contractors are indicating they're ready to start some slurry seal in the Scruggs community pretty quick. Let me turn that off. Too many phones. All right. We're also getting ready to start mowing. We're a couple weeks away from that, but we'll be mowing soon enough on our secondaries and primary roads. And with the weather we've had, that is probably won't be too soon. That's about all of my maintenance update for today. Unless anybody has any questions, I'll move over to construction. All right. So move. Go ahead.
Excuse me, Mr. Daniels. On this 647 K Fork Road, are we getting any closer to getting the pipe put in?
Yeah, Mr. Guy, I don't know that I could say that, Mr. Cundiff, with any level of certainty. We are still working with AEP on the easement acquisition that we had talked about before. What I don't know is if we've gotten communication back from AEP since we last talked to them. So I'll confirm that and get you an answer by phone or email to get you an update on where we are.
Whatever you do, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Todd, it's Ronald Mitchell here. White lines on 5 Mile Mountain Road. Do you have any update on that?
No, Mr. Mitchell, I don't. As far as schedule, I don't. I do know that we are, our paint crews are actively painting in the district. The situation we're all in with the social distancing and what have you has delayed that or slowed it a little bit. Not delayed it, it's slowed it a little bit. But we're actively painting lines throughout the district. I don't know exactly what day the crews will be on what route necessarily, but we can check on 5 Mile specifically and update that as well. I'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
I would also like to add that I really appreciate the work that they have done on 869 Turtle Hill Road, realigning, adding, widening the intersection. I greatly appreciate them getting that done. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir, Mr. Cundiff. And as you probably know, we've got a little more work to do there, putting the final surface on it and completing that project. But I think it'll be a safer intersection, most definitely, once we get it complete.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to construction. Our 122 bridge over Blackwater continues to progress and should be complete late this year. Looking at a November date right now. Ryan and I had a conversation with the construction engineer very recently, and he indicated they were on schedule. A couple other projects I'll highlight while I'm in construction, and I'll come back to traffic studies. But our 122 at Hardy Road and our Brooks Mill Burnt Chimney Road project development both continue at this time. We did award the 718 bridge replacement project. The contractor is not looking to start in May or June. We were hoping for a May or June, but it looks more like a July 1 start. We do have some time of year restrictions, environmental restrictions, that does impact the contractor, but we will still see that bridge under construction this summer, which you can recall does require road closure. So I know we want to get that started as soon as possible. And the last one, as far as construction and projects, is Route 641 Callaway Road. We still have that bridge superstructure replacement. It's a bridge actually right at the elementary school on Callaway Road. That's scheduled to start June 1. With the school calendar changing, obviously schools being out and traffic volumes down considerably everywhere on all of our systems, we have, as the residency, indicated to the construction section that we're not opposed to an early start. So I'm hopeful that the contractor gets started a little earlier than June 1. That date was put in place because of schools. But if they can get started earlier, hopefully they can finish earlier as well. So we've got a little more discussion on whether they get started early or not. But that's still on schedule. As far as traffic studies, you've got a list of traffic studies on page 3, the top of page 3 that we've received over recent months, and we've completed a few of those and actually had a few speed limit reductions. That's usually the most important ones that we would talk about. So you can see on Dugwell Road, the entire stretch, we reduced it to 45, and Bondbrook Mill, we had a segment of it over near 116 that we reduced to 45. And we've added some warning signs as well. So that is my maintenance and construction update. And I'll pause for a second in case anybody has any additional questions.
Mr. Daniels, Chairman Mitchell, it's great to see that 718 bridge award came through. I was a little bit concerned that it might not come in under the bid money. So evidently,
yeah, it came in an acceptable bid, Mr. Chairman, and I don't have the bid tally in front of me. I didn't bring that with me today, but we are moving forward most definitely. So the only change is the July 1 start date, and that was actually requested by the contractor due to some time of year restrictions that are in the contract, and they do affect his productivity because it limits what he can do for the short period of time up to July 1.
Okay, well, we're very thankful and grateful. It's been a long time coming, but we'll get it done. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, moving on. The second part of the VDOT part of the agenda is the Burnt Chimney Road and Route 122, 116 highway changes, basically. And this is not something that's new or unique to a given road or project, but county staff thought it was important that I brief the board. Some of you probably have never seen one of these. It has been a while since we've done one of these in Franklin County, and honestly, this is a cleanup. This project was actually completed in November of 2009, so it goes back quite a ways. And what happens when we complete a project and we realign a roadway, or we move a roadway, if you will? We do an inventory change. We have an inventory of all our roadways and the length of the segments and length of the entire road. So we have to update those. And in this case, we did that. So part of the packet, part of the resolution, is the sketch that's in your paperwork, and it's pretty simple. The change that the board is acting on, and it's somewhat of a formality, but it is a secondary road. So we do involve the local boards of supervisors. But in this case, Route 670 Burnt Chimney Road, we realigned it to come in at more of a 90-degree angle. We teed it up, as we say. It did come out at a slight angle before 2009, and so that change was actually a change in length of road, and that's why we abandoned the old piece of road and we add the new piece, and we document the mileage of those segments. So that is really brief description of what the board is acting on and what you have in front of you. So I will I'll pause once again to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Todd, this is Lori Smith. How are you? Just wanted to inquire if the money to take care of this from the secondary system, is that coming out of Franklin County's allocation for secondary road systems?
No, there is no additional debits to the Franklin County Secondary 6-Year Plan for this project or this activity of amending and adding. It's an administrative task that honestly we do for every project that has some sort of change, Ms. Smith. So no financial impact to the plan.
Thank you very much.
Okay, here are no other questions. I'll move to the third part, which is the secondary 6-year plan. And I think like county revenues and county business moving forward, we've got a lot of stuff that's a little bit up in the air right now. The governor, as you know, tomorrow will present his amendments to various bills and what have you, and our General Assembly comes back in session. One of those changes that's an amendment to a bill is potentially delaying the 6-year plan, the 6-year improvement plan. So to give you a little bit of background and perspective, VDOT has a 6-year improvement plan that is the large overall plan of all of our construction work and various monies that we spend on construction, and that includes our smart scale projects that the counties apply for, our revenue sharing projects that the counties apply for, state of good repair monies that our maintenance, our bridge office uses to program bridge repairs and replacements, and up secondary 6-year plan monies. All of that rolls up under this one large plan that is ultimately, normally, voted on and approved by our Commonwealth Transportation Board in June. Typically, a draft is presented to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in May. Well, this amendment, if approved, allows the delay of that task or that action for up to 1 year. Keep in mind that any changes to our plan, the large plan as a whole, our secondary 6-year plan in Franklin County would be typically changes to an out year. So in this case, FY26 is the new year that we received funding projections for. So the act of continuing the process for 1 year will not delay or change projects in the upcoming fiscal year, so FY21. Those project funds are set. They've been programmed for some years now. The only way that could change is if our financial forecast went down, and we haven't been told that's anybody's thinking that's going to happen for FY21. So the point with all that is that what I don't know today is, do we need to update and adopt the secondary 6-year plan for Franklin County by June, which is typical, or is it better to delay? Now, we don't have to know that today. Lisa Cooper and Steve Sandy and Brian Cassell and Lisa Lewis and I have had a few phone calls last week and this week to make sure we're all on the same page. And once we get a clearer picture of what the amendment passes, and then what our internal guidance is from our central office, you could see a public hearing request from Lisa Cooper next month, which we would obviously hold the public hearing in June and possibly adopt. We may be able to report to you that we don't need to hold that public hearing at this point, because there won't be an adoption of the larger plan. So basically, it's a little bit of a wait and see. I don't have a perfectly clear picture for you, but I want to stress that there's no real concern. We don't have any concern that we're going to have a problem with the secondary 6-year plan. Where my personal concern lies is we don't know what our revenue forecasts are going to be in the out years, and keep in mind the 6-year plan is based on forecast once you get past the upcoming current year, or the upcoming year of FY21. FY22 and forward will be forecasts, and if our economy does shrink a little, we may see some changes in those forecasts. If you recall back in 2009 and the like, we saw our second or 6-year plan contract a little bit. So we can wait and see if that occurs again, and we hope it doesn't. Regardless of what happens, if the plan stays exactly the same, we will still likely not be able to add a project. We likely won't be able to add a project because Red Valley is the last project on the 6-year plan at this time, and it still requires a fair sum of money. So it will take up the majority of, if not all, of the allocation for FY26, assuming all the revenue projections hold the same as they are today.
Okay.
And with that, I will pause again for questions, and if there are none, Mr. Chairman, that will wrap up my presentation, I believe.
I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman, but Mr. Daniels, if you would let the lot in Callaway know that we're very appreciative of what they've been doing during these storms as far as helping the local fire departments clean up the storm damage and letting us focus on other calls. So if you would let them know, I really appreciate what they're doing up there.
I will, Mr. Mitchell. I appreciate you bringing that up. I should have mentioned that in my maintenance report, so I was a little remiss in not doing so. They did. Thank goodness we had some significant rainfall, as you all know, recently, and we didn't have the damage that we received back in late 2018. We did have a few roads here and there received damage, but our area headquarters did get on that pretty quick. We had several trees down, as you noted. And we're still repairing some roads because of it, but we probably came out as well as could be expected with the rate of rainfall that we received in some areas. So I will definitely let them know. Thank you for that.
Okay, if there's no other questions, Ms. Daniel, from listening, would we be just as well off to table item number 9? Or would you like for us to go ahead and pass it?
Forgive me, Mr. Chairman, what are you speaking of? Is for number 9?
Yes, sir.
Which item?
6-year plan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, because I'm looking at 1, 2, 3. I'm with you now. So I think what we do at this point, my recommendation to the board would be to, as you said, table it, if you will, and Mr. Sandy and Ms. Cooper and myself and Lisa Lewis and Brian Casella will continue to work on that and come back to the board in May with a either further information and further guidance that we've received, or a request to hold a public hearing in the month of June. So I think we can hold right now and wait 1 month.
Good luck.
Mr. Chairman, of course, as Daniel said, of course, we can wait 1 month on the secondary 6-year plan, but I do think the board would need to take action in terms of the burnt chimney Route 116, 122 resolution, and authorize us to sign the appropriate that right of way. If I think you are, if Mr. Daniel's still on the line, you are needing action on that item, Mr.
Yes, sir, Mr. Willow, that is right. Thank you.
Attachment number 8.
Number 8. Thank you. Then, if I could, would have a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
You state your motion, please.
Make a motion to approve item number, was it 9, Mr. Chairman?
Item number 9 is we're voting to table it.
Number 8.
Number 8?
Number 8's for 122 and Burnt Chimney Road abandonment, correct, Mr. Daniels?
That is correct. That's the one, yes, sir.
What we're doing is we're tabling this section of the 6-year plan, which is item number 9.
motion to the resolution, which is the board packet, in regards to the burnt chimney route 122 and 116.
Correct.
And then it was seconded by Supervisor Tate.
I will also amend that motion to include an authorization for the county administrator to sign the VDOT forms AM-4.3 as part of the resolution for a secondary system of state highways.
My question is, are we dealing specifically with number 8?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, number 9 was basically a review, and the board can actually, I don't know that you have to act on it, but it's perfectly fine to have a consensus to table the discussion until next month. Number 8 would require action of the board to approve the resolution related to the, as recently stated, Burnt Chimney Road, 122, 116, abandonment and addition of roadways. So number 8 is the one that requires action.
All right. So this, I think his motion pertains to number 8, and the amendment as stated. Mr. Thompson, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you sound loud and clear. So we'll need a motion.
Sorry I was late.
We understand, yes, sir. So we'll go ahead and take a vote on number 8 as amended.
To do a roll call vote. Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Cunt?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Yes.
Supervisor Thompson?
Yes.
And Mitchell?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll need a motion on number 8 for the transfer or the changing of the lines on where they're working. So, and I think this is I believe you said we could do this with a consensus?
Mr. Chairman, if you're asking me,
Okay. No, we have to have a vote. Okay. Could we have a motion for?
Is this in regards to the 6-year plan? Okay,
I think, Mr. Chairman, we've already put the motion and amendment on the floor for attachment 8 relative to 122. And then the next action, I think, is going to be to table the 6-year plan document.
Yes. Okay. This has to be, I'm seeing here that we need a recorded vote. So we have a motion and a second.
Yeah, so we just did the roll call vote for from my understanding, the motion and the motion, which was also amended by Supervisor Smith, and then it was seconded by Supervisor Tatum, which was a roll call vote of 7-0, and that was in regard to the Burnt Chimney Route 122, 116, item number 8.
Okay.
Was item number 8 to be tabled?
No.
No.
Item number 9.
So I think it's
No.
from my understanding that we had taken care of that. Is that?
Yes.
Yes, it's the next item, Mr. Chairman, the review of the secondary 6-year plan, attachment number 9. I think we just need a consensus on that item.
That was the one we tabled.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a consensus that we'll be able to come back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and we need a vote. All in favor of item number 8? I believe we've already, have you?
We've taken care of that
Okay.
one, yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Daniel, we thank you for your report today, and I would add that, the work on 619, looks like it's progressing well, and, the contractor's doing a super job.
Thank you, sir. And we should be finishing that up pretty quickly, and I think we go to Route 602 Fairham Mountain Road near the college next, I believe is where we're headed. So thank you. And thank you to the board.
Thank you. Now, next item is Brian Carter, our Director of Finance.
Your consideration. Okay.
Make sure that it's on.
Well, I've got a digital screen here. Yeah, it says on. Right there.
Try to point to the computer real quick, Dan. Is that easy?
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Okay. We'll do this the old-fashioned way. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. If you go ahead. So on the first slide, we've got the overall look of the general fund that we typically look at. And so this is going to be numbers through March 31st, fiscal year up to that point. This is 9 months out of the fiscal year, so we'd be looking at about 75% of the budget at this point. So looking at the revenues for those that would be considered monthly, you can see that pretty much everything's coming in above that 75% mark, so they are meeting expectations. Going down for expenditures, you see a similar thing. We'd want those at 75% or below. For the most part, all of our major functional areas are. The general and financial administration, we've mentioned before, that's our insurances and our maintenance service contracts with IT, and also our reassessment is in there this year. So that's ticking it up a little bit higher than it would normally be. And we've talked about health and welfare for our social services and CSA. We'll have a little bit more on that later. A lot of things, and I'll get into the other taxes as we go, but really this is going to be for data that really and collections that were made through February. So this is not going to start to show an impact yet on the economy. So we'll go through a little bit more a little later. So to graphically show that for you, if you look, the red line is the current year, blue line is the prior year. So you can see that we have a little bit of a downtick for March in revenue. It's not a concern. It was high in February. A lot of that is timing. I prefer more percent of budget than I do looking at a line graph, but just wanted to show that to you, to show you it's fluctuating, but we're still in line with where we'd want to be. Okay, if you go ahead. So we changed this slide up a little bit. So if you hate it, I'll go back to the old version. But I didn't like the line graph when we were showing you the major tax categories because of the large general property taxes, it was condensing it too much. I didn't think you could see the variation. So what we've got is a little bit different version of this slide for you this month. Still the same 3 categories: general property taxes and other local taxes and the revenue from the state. The yellow bar is the current year. That green line is the prior year. I thought that was a little bit easier to see if it's going above or below where that bar is to get you a trend. And the actual dollars through March 31st are at the bottom, underneath each of those major sections. So as you can see, general property taxes is trending above where it was this point last year by almost $2 million. And that's going to include your real estate, personal property taxes, machinery and tools, merchants capital, all of those are grouped into that category. Personal property and real estate are really the ones that drive that. But personal property is a real reason for the increase on this one. Other local taxes, you can see compared to last year, we're actually down a little bit. Expected that. If you remember, every month our sales taxes are not trending where they were last year. They fall in that category. Meals and transient occupancy do too. Most of the other reason for the reason they're not trending is probably going to be some of your communications taxes that we don't really collect. We get from the state, sales and use through our wireless and our communications providers. That trends down every year, and it has been since the state took it from the local level to the state level several years ago. And then revenue from the Commonwealth is about even. We're about on par with where we were at this point last year, right? So to break,
Carter, could
Yes, sir.
I ask one question? On that other local taxes, tell me again what's included in that, I'm sorry.
You back that up. Other local taxes is going to be your sales tax, your meals tax, your lodging, transient occupancy, communications tax. I'm going to have to look at there are a few others in that category that are much smaller from a percent of our
Would it be
budget.
possible for you to update us on that weekly in the Friday packet
Mhm.
so the board has an understanding of where we stand moving forward?
Sure. We can certainly provide an update. A lot of it, they're only collected monthly. So I can give you an economic update. I may not be able to give you a dollar update until
Right.
those monthly collections are in. But we can certainly provide, whether it's an economic or just a dollar update in your Friday packets going forward, at least for the foreseeable
I
future.
think moving forward during this time, it would be applicable for the board to be aware of decreasing revenues, especially we're entering into this budget
Right.
process, so we know where we stand.
Correct. Be happy to do that.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank
And
you.
we're in the time frame now to where our tax collections for meals and occupancy and even sales taxes should start to be coming in. They usually do around the 20th. The state is always behind, but if you remember, the state deferred sales taxes for a month, so that more than likely will mean our local portion of those sales taxes are deferred as well.
Right.
Typically, though, Mr. Carter, doesn't sales tax lag about 2 months?
Correct. Sales tax is 2 months behind.
I think it's important that we understand that.
You are correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So break down a little bit more your real estate. So we are at about $174,000 above where we were this point last year. That's mostly due to growth. As you can see, the percentage change is about 0.4%. So if you remember, we always target about 0.5% in growth in real estate in a non-reassessment year. We're right around that marker where we want to be. So as a percent of budget, we're trending about the same. We're a little behind at 99.37%. We do typically collect. It typically comes in October, November, December. We collect throughout the rest of the year as people are able to pay their taxes. So you do see some variation in the numbers even after the December 5th due date. I'm not sure how this will now affect, as it's difficult for some taxpayers to pay that. So we might actually see this percentage drop a little bit as we move forward until we get a little more normalcy back. Okay. All right, so for personal property, you can see the large increase, 1.3 million. It's at 12.2% of a change. When we back out the $880,000 to $900,000 worth of one-time money for the pipeline contractors, we're at about a 3.95% growth, which is, again, what we would want to average for personal property in a 3 to 4% range for an average healthy level of growth in that category. So we're trending where we would expect. This is a similar thing to real estate in that these taxes are paid throughout the fiscal year, I could see a little bit of a normalization to this. I think I'd see it dropping a little bit as we go through June. So for sales taxes, to Ms. Smith's point, this is for January collections that we were paid by the state in March. So you can see we're still down compared to last year, about $173,000. That's about a 4% drop. We anticipated that. As far as budget goes, we're at 82.5% of budget. So we're 7.5% over where we would want to be in the budget at this point. So sales taxes are still healthy. Part of the concern for us, especially in sales taxes, they're a much larger component of the county budget, is that with the state's deferral of a month, we're not even going to get March taxes until realistically June. And that's a huge lag to see the impact. So we're monitoring. We keep up with what the state is telling us at this point because we have no real data on our local sales tax collections other than what we see in the empty streets and the empty storefronts.
If you had to predict the drop,
Yes,
and I don't want to put you on the spot, what do you think that figure is going to look like in 2 months?
It's tough to predict. I would say, and I a little bit later in the slide, I'm kind of hedging a little bit because I have a little bit more discussion on economic update. Depending on how quickly we can return, I still think you're going to look at a 10% drop in sales tax. We are helped by the fact that starting or effective last July, we are collecting internet sales taxes. That's helping to mitigate the drop. Had we not had that from the General Assembly effective for this fiscal year, it would be even more pronounced. So we're thinking at least 10%, and that's a lot of what we're seeing statewide and talking with counterparts in our finance departments. They're looking at least 10% at this point for on average.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so for meals taxes, through March, we've collected $931,287. That's up about $50,000 compared to the same point last year, about 5.7%. These are only a month behind, so this is February. This is still before anything started shutting down, so no indicator. Same thing if you go to the next one. Transient occupancy, we're up almost $14,000 or 13.5%. And we expect an even more precipitous drop in that. So I'll get to that in a few later slides. So on the expenditure side, you can see kind of a gap. That's about a $3 million gap from where we were last year. That is mostly attributed to our monthly transfer to the school system. It really, as I'm looking at it, is more of a timing. Part of what we look at is cash flow with the school system, and that varies depending on when their state and federal reimbursements come in as to how much cash they need in a given month. When I look back, and we won't turn back to that slide, but on the overall general fund chart, the school fund is at 75% of budget for their overall operating fund, which is exactly where they should be at this time of year. So it's not a concern that this is up at this point. It's a timing differential. They're at their percent of budget, which is where they should be. Okay.
Mr. Carter, do you know if we're going to be delayed? There's no one here from the school system with regard to usually the March notification for ADM.
I think we are. The last I talked with Mr. Terry about just ADM and the re-benchmarking, all of those things in general, they were expecting to get some new numbers. I think they're kind of waiting for the General Assembly to reconvene. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we will have a better picture of state numbers and for the education side of things.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so your categories for expenditures, these are pretty similar and consistent. We're seeing about level funding as far as comparison on your expenditures year to year. Public safety is up again, so is health and welfare. That's not unusual. That's going to show some growth. Public safety is more pronounced because it's so large. It's such a large percent of the budget. You have so many more employees in there. You see that. And health and welfare will break that down, but that's your CSA and social services again. So showing you that breakdown, you can see What's really up is social services programs. And so a lot of that is the same thing we're hitting with CSA. It's your foster care. So 4E foster care specifically is paid out of the social services programs category. The two main drivers of CSA, we had an $850,000 month for CSA expenditures, and almost all of it was, or 2/3 of it at the very least, was foster care and private day. Those are the two categories that are driving our CSA budget right now. So as you can see, at least for CSA, we are level. So while we're not really seeing any reduction in costs, we have leveled it off. We were seeing 40-50% reductions when you look at a 3 to 5 year trend. So at least that's a silver lining. But social services is typically reimbursed heavily by the state through the federal government to the tune of somewhere around 80-85%. So even though those are gross numbers, those are not necessarily all county dollars that are going into that. Just want you to make sure you're aware of that. But we are seeing the increase, and that's typical statewide of what's driving Health and Human Services budgets at this point.
Well, Mr. Carter, do we expect to see any representative savings from day residential, given that the state's not reimbursing when schools are not in session?
So the latest guidance on that is that the state will reimburse. That's come out in the last month. I think that was an ambiguous point of contention. So they said they will reimburse. What we have done is that the CPMT and our regional CPMTs who share our contract language has sent letters to the private day providers to basically go back through the IEP process, Individualized Education Plan, revise those services because they're obviously not being provided as they were put originally in their education plan. And then we will see those rates at that point and ask for reimbursement. So assuming all that goes smoothly, the state has confirmed that they will reimburse those expenditures.
Okay, that I did not know.
Yes, ma'am. That's been the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I got in the communications, stating there would be no reimbursement. So I'm glad you clarified that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So fund balance hasn't changed. That's still around $2 million. We haven't really dedicated any more out of our fund balance at this point. So if you go ahead. All right, the economic update. So I'm kind of going to go over a national, state, and then local level, just high-level points. So couple of things that the state is using. I pulled this right off of the Secretary of Finance's website for the Commonwealth. Real GDP, the markers that they use, this IHS market, and that is not a typo, that actually spell it MARKIT, is 3.5% for the first quarter of 2020. And they're looking for the second quarter, we're in now, April to June, to decline 26.5%. That has not been seen since the Great Depression. So what we're hoping is that's very conservative. And we're hoping, since it was more of a planned contraction of the economy, that it's easier to come out of. But as we're looking at budgets, this is what we have to deal with. So one of the things that most analysts, when I say analysts, your big economist type firms, are looking at, when you look at your Bank of America's, your Wells Fargo's, your Bear Stearns, those type things. They're looking at a rebound to realistically start of any real nature in the fourth quarter of 2020 in the single digits, 2-3%, I think, 3.5% maybe. And then the first quarter of 2021 right now to start back up into, I believe it's 4 or 5% growth. That's where we're looking at for an economic rebound based on a lot of people that are smarter than I am. So I'm just reading what they put out. So that's what we're keeping in mind as we look at the county's budget and the possible indicators. The greater concern for us is the Virginia budget. And so you can see their March collections, individual income taxes fell about 0.5%. Sales taxes actually were up. That was a month behind for the state level, so that we also expect that impact to start to take effect next month or this month. One of the things that's very concerning for us, and I think statewide, is that 87% of their budget, their revenue, comes from income taxes and sales taxes. And this is straight off of their website. So obviously, if one, you have people who can't pay income taxes or they delay it, and then the sales taxes drop, they take a huge hit. For us, it won't impact necessarily as much to the state this fiscal year because most people have already made their earnings for the 2019 calendar year. It's just a matter of when they pay it, if they have the money to. If the job picture does not clear up, if it remains steady throughout 2020, what's going to happen is in the unemployment picture, your income taxes for next year are going to be an issue. And those are the taxes that the state is planning to fund its budget for fiscal year 2021, which is where we're worried about reductions in state funding. Okay, so if you, yep, you got it. So anticipated, we really don't know the impact. You know, Governor Northam said, well, let's have a strategic pause kind of situation. The General Assembly will come back tomorrow to look at his amendments. There really hasn't been, other at this point, just unallotting new funding, new spending priorities. There hasn't been anything that we have seen about cuts to existing. But one of the things is the Secretary of Finance, Mr. Lane, is expecting $1 billion loss in each fiscal year of 2021 and 2022. And over 50% of our combined county school budget comes from the state or federal government. We absolutely know there will be an impact. We just do not know how much. So from a local perspective, again, it's difficult to project because we have such a lag in our indicators. So what we're going with is what we see from other indicators at this point, other than just general local tax collections. What we are seeing is in our fiscal year 2021 revenue projections for real estate and personal property, which are the main drivers of our budget, we're looking at either lowering those projections or assuming there will be a higher uncollectible percentage, which means normally real estate we budget 97%. We expect we're going to collect 97% of what's billed. Historically, that's been about accurate. So we're planning to drop that to 95%. Just to give you an impact, that drops it from about $2.2 million to $1 million, just dropping 2 percentage points in a collection percentage. For personal property, we did not drop it. It's typically historically at 93% collection. So we kept that at 93%, but we're dropping the growth projection there. So we're basically keeping personal property level funded. Real estate, we couldn't really do that because of the reassessment year. So we really didn't want to try and gauge that. We went with the collection percentage on that one. So as far as sales taxes, what we've seen so far has been some information out of the Old Dominion University and a little bit out of University of Virginia, some Virginia Tech. We're trying to go with their percentages on economic impact at this point. Some people are even going stronger in one direction or another. For a county, these aren't as critical. For if you are a city or a town, your budget, rests on sales and meals taxes. So, and occupancy taxes. For a county, it's not near a percentage of our budget, but we're still projecting a 10% decrease in sales taxes. That's about $500,000 for us. So we wiped out what was going to be about 5% of growth plus another 10% drop. So it's technically a net drop of 15% for next fiscal year from what was proposed to you a month ago. We're looking at a 25% drop in meals taxes. It could be higher. Unless you have a drive-through, you're not doing very well right now. And 50% in occupancy taxes. There's just nobody traveling for anything. So this is taking a look over the whole year. So if we extend into the summer, into the fall, into the winter, or we have a recurrence where we have another shutdown before a vaccine is available, we're just looking at long-term picture for a fiscal year perspective on what this may look like. So for meals, it's much less, and when we get to the budget discussion, we actually have a handout. We'll go through those details with you. Occupancy taxes for us is insignificant. Every dollar counts, but our major concern is sales and meals taxes. So overall, there is a budget reduction projected right now of $3.3 million from what we presented a month ago. And that's mostly discretionary. There's a little bit in there of other revenues that are not what we consider discretionary. We'll go through that in the budget side. For the rest of this fiscal year, we are fairly confident, unless we really have some state reductions in this year, that we'll, at the very least, kind of break even, be close to it. We had 3 very good quarters of very good solid growth. We had an extra nearly $1 million in personal property tax collections from pipeline contractors that was not budgeted nor anticipated. So if we can, we're fortunate in that from a county perspective, our property taxes are in. We have our sales, meals, and lodging taxes, and so those are the ones that are going to limp along for the rest of the fiscal year. So barring any cuts in state reimbursements, we think we'll have enough of a surplus to really about break even this year. We're not expecting a lot of carryover. That is a concern because we usually fund one-time capital projects with carryover that we just can't find the money for during the year. So that's going to start to create an impact as we move forward over the next 2 to 3 years as it backs up. And with that, that's all I have for now until we get into a budget discussion. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This, back at another page you just blanked out,
Did you go back a little?
the 3 million.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Whether it's luck or not, I don't know what you're going to call it, but we haven't really hit our season yet for the meal tax and occupancy tax because the vacation's just starting to come in, this, that, and the other.
Yes.
Now, this 3.3 million projection, is everything stays like it is now, or is that going to take into account of summer's coming on, everybody's going to start getting out and doing more once we get out of this pandemic crisis? So is this 3.3 million, is that if it continues like it is, or is this, if it does pick up, it's still going to be $3.3 million short?
It's a hodgepodge. If everything continues like it is until for several months past the summer season, it's going to be worse.
Yeah.
We're anticipating overall for the fiscal year about 25%, which means that we have probably some return in the summer. It will probably be lower than what we typically have in a summer collection period. It also assumes that we're probably going to see, as the economy recovers, slower and lower consumer spending throughout the rest of the fiscal year. So overall, 25% reduction, but it is assuming a return to normalcy in the next 3 months, hopefully.
Well, if they ever turn it loose, I got a feeling you're going to see a tremendous gain because people are tired of sitting at home.
We would hope so.
Everybody's going to be flooded at one time.
Yep.
So I'm saying, I just wonder if that figure is going to hold true for all the year, or is there variation in that figure compared to if everything opens up?
Well, this is typically the figure that most state economists and local governments are looking at right now.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you, nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Right.
This is not something we have a historical precedent on, so we really don't know where the economy is going to go and how quickly it's going to bounce back. A lot of what most of the economists are saying is even though you may start to open it up, and what you're seeing from governors now and even the president with these kind of steps, is you're going to phase it in. So everybody's not going to go out immediately. They're not going to go right back to where their normal life was. And typically, when you have, whether it's a recession or whether you have an economic downturn or some condition like this, even if it's not to this level, there's a timidity initially, especially for those who are laid off. So they're not going to immediately go back out once they start working again and spend everything. They're going to put some aside, save it. They're going to be more cautious with their discretionary spending. This is trying to take all of that into account, but it is by no means an accurate guess that we can verify at all. It's conservative enough to not get us in serious trouble, but revenues could go one way or the other. It could get worse. It could get better.
I'd like to add to what I agree with Tommy 100%. One thing I want you to keep in mind, and I think I briefly mentioned this to Chris, the population in Franklin County is, if I were to put a number, probably 5,000 plus right now. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people that are working from home are working from home at their lake homes. Right. If you go to the lake on this weekend, if it's nice outside, you're going to see it's like the 4th of July weekend at the lake right now. Mm-hmm. The lake is packed. So we have a lot more people in the county spending money right now, which is earlier than what we typically would have. 2, the restaurants that are doing curbside to go and even deliveries are telling me they're up as much as 30% in food sales. So let's just keep that in mind as we move forward.
Yeah.
I'm a very optimistic person. I think Tommy hit the nail on the head. I think the governor gave May 8th. Is that correct? I think you're going to see our state just take off and run. And I know this is a worst case scenario, but I think we need to plan for the worst, but I still think we need to be optimistic that everything's going to be all right. And I think we need to portray that to the citizens of this county that everything is going to be all right and we are going to get back to work and everything is going to get back to normal.
Right.
So just keep those two things in mind because I think we're going to be surprised. I could be completely wrong. Like you said, nobody knows, but I see it not being as bad for Franklin County as maybe some other areas. Our population's up right now. And the people that are selling food, they're way up in food sales right now. The ones that are doing curbside to go and delivery. So there's still meals tax that we're going to see. It's not, I think 25%. Like I said, I could be wrong, but I'd like for us to try to portray an optimistic picture for our citizens as well and our department heads. And moving forward, I think we're going to look at this on a quarterly basis, Chris. So I think it's really important that we do that. Just wanted to give you my 2 cents. I agree with Tommy Cundiff 100%.
As the old saying goes, expect the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, plan for the worst. Hope for the
I
best.
think this county is poised to set a good hope. I think you'll see a big difference in these figures when whoever turns us loose to go back to normal.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
No, sir, I lost the phone a while ago. I had a call come in and I lost. That's what it was. Sorry about that. I'm watching y'all on the YouTube.
That's great.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make one comment if I can. I've said this before, but I really give a lot of thanks to the board that has been seated prior to myself and Mr. Mitchell coming on. You all have done a lot of work to put the county in a good financial position to have to get into this environment of great financial challenge. So I want to make sure that we remember the work that's been done over the last few years to disposition the county in a favorable way financially.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
Wish I could have got ahead of that projection analysis that you got. Anyway, back before you today to talk about short-term rentals. We spoke last month about several things that, all right, thank you. Several things here that the Planning Commission had discussed and considered. We discussed those last month and didn't necessarily take action. I think we got consensus to move forward with those last month. So what's before you in packet 10 is kind of the actual code amendments and action items for each one of those items. So my intent would be to go through those piece by piece. I think we could maybe just take action on each item. That might be the easiest way to get us through that. And then we'll move to attachment 11 after that, when we talk a little bit more about some additional changes to the zoning ordinance.
We didn't approve.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak for a moment, please?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be prudent with everything that's going on in the public hearing and everything. I think we need to table this instead of taking any action on it because it's going to affect the whole county, not just one or two districts. And I don't mind going through with the talk, but I'd like to table the action part until maybe the June or July meeting before we do anything with this because of the situation we're in.
Okay, and I might add that we held item number 2. We did not,
Correct, yeah, I was gonna cover
Voted,
that.
so-
I think it's the second item of the bullet points that I was gonna cover that.
What item was that, Mr. Chairman?
yes, sir.
What are you wanting to hold? You said item number 2. What are you talking about?
No, I think item number 2 was one you pulled from the consent
Yeah, we
agenda.
pulled in,
Oh.
Kind of held over for this discussion, I think.
Gotcha.
I guess we'll vote on it after the discussion.
Correct, and I guess based on Mr. Thompson's suggestion, it's up to the board if you want to continue with the discussion or you want to table it until a future date.
Mr.
I'd
Chair-
like to continue with discussion.
You want to continue?
I would,
Mr.
yeah.
Chairman, I would concur with that, keeping in mind that what we're trying to do today with these action items is to set a public hearing, which moves us out into May. And then beyond May, we'll still be dealing with this in June. So this could easily, by the time we're finished and done, work us into the beginning of the new fiscal year. So, and most of these things in this section are language-oriented and fine-oriented. And so I think I don't see any punitive reason to table these matters at this time.
I agree with Ms. Smith.
Well, somewhere in this process, we're gonna vote on attachment number 2. I mean, not attachment number 2, but consent agenda number 2.
Yes, sir. And unless the board wants to delay all discussion until a future date. So just,
I do not want to delay discussion.
Well, I agree with Ms. Thompson. I think it should be delayed because we got too much going on right now to try to sift through this, and we got other matters on hand.
Well, item number 2 is approval of a contract with host compliance for short-term rentals, and this is a separate item I think that we need to address today.
yeah, and that one does go with the short-term rental registry as well, so the two of those kind of go together. That third-party vendor is going to help us with that registry if we decide to move forward with that.
Excuse me for just a minute there, Mr. Chairman. Item number, the short-term rental that, what you're talking about was item number 2 on the consent agenda. Now, I wasn't present with that. Was it not taken care of then?
Carried over, and item number 10 is totally separate from item number 11. And I don't think we need to mix the two items, and I'm asking that we deal with item number 10.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that since Mr. Cundiff has asked for things to be tabled, that we get a consensus from the board on what the board's desire is to have these discussions today as scheduled or not.
I have one comment. If we go ahead and make a decision on item number 2 today, does that go hand in hand with 10 and 11, or can we do number 2 by itself without making a decision on the other 2?
It does go with the first bullet item under 10, I would say, the registry. So the two of those go.
We need to do it all or table the whole deal.
Correct. I think you could table 11 separately from 10, the
Yeah.
discussion on 11.
Because we need to deal with item number 10 today. If we're going to have this company overseeing short-term rentals, we need to get that done.
Yes, sir.
I think we need to move forward with discussion. I've been getting email after email on all this short-term rental business. So I would like for us to go ahead and, this is just my opinion, make some sort of decision today.
I agree that we need to take care of item number 2 and item number 10, and we may want to set aside attachment 11 for a later date.
I'll go along with that. I think, like I said, we need to get 2 and 10 started, and that'll help reflect back on 11 when we come back in or however, whenever we discuss it. But we do need to take care of 2 and 10.
And, you know, even if we approve the contract today, it will take them some time to start monitoring the lake.
Correct.
And doing the terms of their contract.
That's correct.
My understanding, this is a year's trial.
It's an annual agreement, so after 1 year, we can modify the agreement or we can terminate the agreement. That's correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Sandy be allowed to proceed with his presentation.
Of item number 10.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sandy?
Okay, thank you, sir. So again, attachment number 10, we discussed several of these items previously. Under your discussion items in attachment 10, you have separate bullet items for each one. So my intention would be to go through each one of those bullet items. If the board chooses to do action for each one of those separately, that's fine, or we can take one action at the end. The first item is the creation of the short-term rental registry. So we've talked about the Virginia General Assembly enabled localities to create a registry where those that are performing short-term rentals will be required to come to the county and register with the county that they're going to use their structure for a short-term rental. We would have a list of those. The commissioner's office would have a list of those and know who all is operating in the county under short-term rentals. Currently, it's a lot of staff time, both in my office and the commissioner's office, to kind of go out and find the ones that haven't come to us and voluntarily registered. So this would be a way to kind of bring people to the table and let us make sure we have a good list of who's actually doing those short-term rentals in the county. One of the things we've talked about there is the code does allow for a fine if people do not register their property. And so that maximum fine is set by the General Assembly, and that's $500. So we've included that in the registry. We've also included an annual registration fee. And the vision here is that this annual registration fee would help us pay for that third-party vendor to be able to do the services that they're doing. In addition, it would compensate the county for an annual inspection that would be required by the fire marshal or public safety or the building department each year to check on those items like fire extinguishers and smoke detectors and bedrooms and so forth. So that's the intent there. We've given you a draft amendment to the county code section 5.5. And so this registry would apply to short-term rentals countywide, not just in the zoned area, but anyone creating a short-term rental or using a short-term rental in the county would be required to register.
Mr. Sandy, I have a question on section 5.5-70, where it talks about being exempt under the ordinance. You got 4 exemptions.
Correct.
I don't think anyone should be exempt. If there's a $200 fee for registering as a short-term rental, most of the short-term rentals are going to be under some of the real estate companies, so they're exempt. They don't have to register.
Well, this is taken exactly from the legislation that the General Assembly passed. So my understanding of this is that we have to allow that exemption based on the statutory authority that we have. I don't know if Mr. Gwynn wanted to chime in, but they're probably, because of the lobbying, would be my guess, is that group was able to lobby to be out of the registry requirement. So in my opinion,
$200 registry fee, if we got 250 in the county, and let's say, I'd probably say 200 of those are probably going to be under a real estate company, we're not going to get enough from the ones that aren't to even pay for the host compliance.
It's probably about half. I don't know the number for sure, but it's probably
so $25,000 as opposed to $50,000.
Yeah, which is about where we're at with that fee. So that was another reason for kind of the buffer of the fee to help us kind of be able to cover those costs. And I think after a year we can kind of reevaluate too, you know, if we were able to get enough revenue to cover it and which pieces of that agreement we want to continue with and need to continue with. But as far as the exemption, yeah, that's a Virginia code mandate. and we're not allowed to change that.
So the same thing about, it says no more than, or 1 bedroom, 2 adults allowed per bedroom over anyone over the age of 5. So if you get
No, that in section 72, no, that's different. So
that, we can change that.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'll get into that actually in one of the later bullet points, that
Okay.
section.
Just chime in, let me know, just so I don't.
Section 70 is primarily the registry. And,
Okay.
and that really comes straight from state code section as far as what we're allowed to do there.
Now, these real estate companies that don't have to register, how do we monitor the houses that they're in charge of?
They still come to the commissioner's office and report those that are being rented and the income for those.
So will host compliance be able to go out and address any complaints that come from these houses?
Yes, they'll
Okay.
still be, they'll still be part of any of the zoning requirements that are.
So
out there.
host compliance will still know where these houses are that are not necessarily registered?
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Sandy.
Yes, sir.
Action item, authorize staff to schedule a public hearing to amend Franklin County Code. Do we have to have a public hearing to adopt this item number 2?
With a third-party vendor?
No, I'm just talking about in the consent agenda, item number 2, that we're approving with Host Connections, and here in this on second page, it says authorize staff to schedule a public hearing to amend Franklin County Code. What are we amending?
That's for the registry item. So yes, to amend the county code, section 5.5, we have to have a public hearing before you can adopt that change. So for the registry, we're asking that you schedule a public hearing. I intentionally left it blank as far as you want to do that in May or June to see what the board's pleasure was on doing that. But that would be for the registry itself. For the third-party vendor, no, you do not have to hold a public hearing for that. The city of Lynchburg uses host compliance, and they put out a request for proposals. Within their contract, there is a reciprocal agreement, cooperative agreement, where other Virginia localities can utilize the same contract. And so that's what we propose, to be able to utilize the same terms of the contract. So we do not need to hold a public hearing for that.
So if we pass attachment number 2, will we still have to have a public hearing for it?
Not for that, but for the registry, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think it might be helpful. Mr. Sandy had said maybe if we just take each of these sections with the associated action item just one at a time, that might prove to be more helpful to the board to keep these in order.
Yeah, so if you're following those bullets, the
Yes.
first one, maybe I should have numbered them, would have been easier, but the first bullet would be seeking authorization for staff to schedule a public hearing. Again, whether you want that in May or June, it looks like in May we've got several that have public hearings that are scheduled through the special use permits and rezonings and so forth. We could certainly do it then, or we could hold it off till June. It's kind of the board's pleasure.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we authorize staff to schedule the public hearing with regard to Chapter 5.5 with respect to the registry and the annual registry fee and fine as articulated by staff in the documentation, and that said public hearing be held in May.
I'll second that motion.
This would really apply to section 5.5-70, which is the registry requirement.
Now, what's this, refresh me, what's this public meeting supposed to accomplish?
Well, we'll get into that later. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's this public meeting supposed to accomplish, this hearing?
Anytime you amend the county code, you have to have a public hearing to amend it. So in this particular case, people could come forward and say, we don't agree with the registry you know, in this particular case, or we think the annual registration fee, you know, is too much or too little. Or so anytime we amend the code, we have to, by code, have to hold a public hearing. So that's mandated. You could take action on it immediately after you hold the public hearing in May. What we would propose is that registry become effective July 1, so folks would have to register their short-term rentals July 1st.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
what's your concerns or feelings?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, it doesn't take a whole lot to confuse me. And because I wasn't there at the very beginning, I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to figure it out. I asked to table things, and that was ignored, and I don't know where we're at. Are you talking about item 2 on the consent agenda, approval of contract with host compliance for short-term rentals, monitoring and compliance services? Was this pulled from the consent agenda?
Sir.
All right, so that was pulled. So that's what we're talking about now, is dealing with that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And number 10. And 2 running pretty close together.
10 is just an explanation, isn't it?
Yeah, we're on attachment number 10, the first bullet.
Yeah.
Is what we're looking at. Creating the registry. So the motion before the board now, Mr. Thompson, is to approve the registry requirement and schedule a public hearing in May for that item.
And there's a motion and a second on the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Would you,
Can't get my hands.
Madam Clerk, would you read the motion?
So the motion that, what Mr. Sandy just said, which was motioned by Supervisor Smith and seconded by Supervisor Mitchell, is to move forward with the registry requirement and direct staff to schedule a public hearing in regard to 5.5-70 and to schedule that in May.
Okay. Now, I think I need some clarification. Consent agenda requires action, which is number 2. Are we taking that action now?
That's going to be our next action. So right now, the motion is to approve the registry. Is that correct?
Okay.
Correct.
Any other discussion?
Any motions for what now? I'm like Ronnie, I'm lost.
The motion on the floor is to approve a public hearing to create the short-term rental. Next item we'll discuss is the third-party vendor.
If everybody will just go to section 10 and follow the memorandum by section, that's what Mr. Sandy's asking us to do. And this first motion addresses the first bullet under discussion at the bottom of that page. And this is the first action item.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you'll call the roll.
Give me one question. Mr. Thompson, do you understand that now, sir?
I think I do. I think what's going on is item 2 was pulled, and you keep talking about item 2, but it was pulled, which is item 10 now. Short-term rental agreement.
Correct.
In my mind, item 2 on the consent agenda and item 10 on Mr. Sandy's are in fact the same thing.
We're going to get to the approval of the third-party vendor next. Vote on this creation of the registry, which is that consent agenda item.
Madam Clerk?
We're gonna vote on the motion, by Supervisor Smith, seconded by Supervisor Mitchell, which is under discussion, the first bullet point, short-term rental registry, which is in regards to section 5.5-70, and that's directing staff to schedule a public hearing in the month of May. I'm gonna do a roll call. Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Cundiff?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum?
Yes.
Supervisor Thompson?
Yeah.
Chairman Mitchell?
Yes. Passes.
Okay. So now the second bulleted item under that memorandum talks about the third-party vendor, and this is in your staff report. It actually says this was taken care of under consent agenda, which that was pulled from consent agenda for discussion now. What we are proposing is that with the registry, we enter into this agreement with the third-party vendor host compliance, utilizing the contract that they have with the city of Lynchburg. With us following that same contract, we can piggyback on that. And so a copy of that agreement has been provided in your packet. And again, the costs associated with this are expected to be wholly or at least partly covered by the registration fee that's part of the registry.
And Mr. Sandy, I would like to say how much I appreciate bringing the cost of this in line and doing that due diligence so that the service can be procured by the county without, without offsetting revenue. I think that's a very important component. And this is really the nexus of this entire initiative is to have this firm in place.
Correct.
Madam Clerk, we're ready for.
Okay, so we're ready. Oh.
So yeah, we need a motion to approve the agreement.
I make the motion.
And authorize the county attorney and the county administrator to sign those documents.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and this is for the third-party vendor. I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Cundiff?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum?
Yes.
Supervisor Thompson?
Yeah.
Chairman Mitchell?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving to the third bullet item, which is safety of short-term rentals. If you look at the proposed amendments to section 5.5, in addition to the registry requirement, what we've proposed is that some of these general regulations and safety considerations be placed in this section as well, so that this gets back to a point that the board would like to see some of these requirements be countywide to short-term rentals. So this doesn't get into requiring a special use permit or anything like that, because that's in the zoning ordinance. This is strictly to state those general regulations on short-term rentals, which is the bedrooms, the compliance with 2 adults per bedroom, the parking requirements that go with it.
I would like to.
The noise requirements.
I got a comment about that.
Yes, sir.
I don't think it should say 2 adults. I think it should be 2 persons, no matter the age. Because say you have a house that has 5 bedrooms, for example. There's 5 young couples come in. There's 10 adults. Well, if they each have a couple kids under the age of 5, you get up to 20 people in that house, and that just goes against what I brought up as a safety concern for our fire departments. I don't like the fact that it says 2 adults. I think it needs to say 2 persons. So if you got 5 bedrooms, that's 10 people, not 10 adults and however many kids under the age of 5. And we can change that.
But yeah, that's not a change from what's currently in the county code. So,
well, the way I read it, it said 2 adults over the age of 5. So anything
so
under.
In this case, an adult is considered any child over the age of 5.
What I'm saying is 5 and under needs to be considered as a person.
Correct. I understand that. What I'm saying is this is not a change from what we currently have, so that would be a change to the current requirement. This is what you see in 5.5-72 is what already appears under supplemental regulations in the zoning ordinance. This would also make some of these items apply countywide to those non-zoned areas, and so the parking regulations, the noise, the aspect of adults per bedroom. But that's not new, so if we want to change that, I think we could. I think at some point in the past, a determination was made that a person, for the purposes of a septic system, is somebody over the age of 5. So,
yeah, the septic is something we need to be worried about, and take into consideration, but the life safety aspect of it is you got 20 people in a house. That is a huge risk, and an unfamiliar house at that, because they're coming in a week. You got different people coming in every week. They're not familiar with somebody, and some of these houses are, I mean, you easily get lost in them. So I think it's any age.
And that's the board's pleasure. I just wanted to make sure you understood that wasn't a change from the way it currently is.
Mr. Sandy, if we change that ordinance, would we have to have a public hearing to make that change?
If it's under 5.5, yes, you still have to hold a public hearing, because again, you're amending the county code. So yeah, you have to have a public hearing to make that change.
Could I add one more comment on that? And I don't know if we want to do this, I'm just putting it out. Evacuation plans posted in these houses, like a floor plan.
Yes, sir. So I did want to mention under 5.5-72, letter G, that we would propose, in addition to what's in your report, to include just that. An evacuation plan of the house should be posted.
Yeah.
And that would be part of what the inspection would look at. So the inspection would look at the fire extinguishers there, the smoke detectors are in each room, and the evacuation plan is also posted in the house.
And along with that, will there be any type of, I guess, county-issued permit or anything that has to be posted near the front door or whatever, showing that, one, it is a short-term rental property that is properly registered and they've paid their fees and everything, and having something identifying what the occupancy level for that residence has been established at, basically identifying that they've done what they're supposed to and they're in compliance, and that here's their certificate of approval that they can be a short-term rental. Is anything like that required at this time?
We're proposing that be inside the structure. We have not proposed that anything be outside.
Well, that's what I meant, inside the structure, but probably near the front. Once you make entrance, it'd be somewhere close, or maybe even in the kitchen area. But will they have to have something that is visible?
Yeah. So what the fire marshal and the building official would like was, with that evacuation plan, would have that information. But so it'd be posted inside. But I want to make clear that there is not a proposal to have anything outside the structure to kind of notify others that it is a short-term rental. So if we want to look at considering that, then I would need some feedback on that.
I think it's a great idea too.
So inside, we would have some listing of the occupancy based on the number of bedrooms, but nothing on the outside that would indicate it's a short-term rental.
Another thing I think would be helpful is on the enforcement end of it. I think we need to have some time with, whether it's Commissioner of Revenue, your office, or whatever, get with the sheriff and their staff to educate their people. Say, for instance, there's a residence down on a lake that has family there, and they get a complaint. The sheriff's department gets called. Once they get there and they identify, hey, this is a short-term rental, and they're in violation of county code. But now, what's our next step? Who to report it to, or what do we do? I'd like to see us get with the sheriff and have a procedure. What do they need to report it to the Commissioner of Revenue's office? Do they need to report it to you, or do they need to issue a summons for county violation? I think we need to identify that procedure, and so that once we get going, we do have our people that are out there every day. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, so one of the good things with that third-party agreement we just approved is that it has an enforcement hotline.
Good.
And it has mechanisms for neighbors and others to report, violations, concerns, noise issues, drunkenness, whatever the case may be, to that 24/7 hotline number. So the hope is that would take some of those non-emergency calls off the sheriff's office.
I just want to make sure, they're our front line.
Yeah, and what we can do is make sure they have that information, so dispatch can then forward that to the neighbors to say, hey, call this hotline number. Your complaint will get registered there. You can submit pictures, you can submit videos, you can do those kind of things. Now, of course, if it's a life safety issue, certainly they're still going to need to call the sheriff's office if it's critical. But if it's just a complaint that you know, they want to register a complaint, they can do that through the third-party system.
Well, we also know that the neighbors will know they can contact this third party. Let's be real. If it's a loud party, they're going to pick up the phone and dial 911. They're not going to call this third party. So that puts our sheriff's department out there. And I just want to make sure they have the resources to know where the referral needs to be made. Because I don't, you know, working that line of duty, I don't like getting put into a situation where I have to do something and I haven't been given all the information I need to do it. And I think we need to make sure they're kept up to speed. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Steve, I have one question moving forward, and this may involve the county attorney, Mr. Gwynn. If we are setting up these safety parameters and so forth, and basically giving our seal of approval, what liability are we setting the county up for, saying that this structure's safe, and if somebody rents it and it catches on fire and we haven't done our due diligence, are we protected as a county?
Generally, the doctrine of sovereignty.
So it's going to fall on the rentor, not the county? Okay.
Mr. Sandy?
Go ahead.
Under section 5.5-72C with regard to septic, clarify something for me, just through casual observation. It doesn't appear to me that when the Planning Commission takes up a special use permit for short-term rental, is there a requirement that that septic certificate or update or evaluation takes place prior to the issuance of the permit? For some reason, it looks like a gray area to me that it's just put in writing that you must comply. I would be interested in making sure that that compliance is achieved prior to a certificate being granted for short-term rental.
Yeah, so what the commission has been doing recently is attaching that as a condition to say, before operating that short-term rental, we need certification either from an engineer or septic hauler or the health department that it complies with the number of bedrooms.
Well, if we're making that a condition and it's something that you guys are going to do routinely, should we go ahead and recodify that part of the language?
I think we could make it more clear under Part C there.
If you would, that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
so we can put something there that we bring back for the public hearing.
Yeah, because I get real concerned about these houses being overloaded from a septic perspective with regard to the load, especially if you have a failing system and then the lake could become compromised. That's a big deal.
Yes, we can make that amendment before we advertise for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Same as the occupancy, load and evacuation plan. We'll make sure that's included in the copy that goes to public hearing. So the next action item would be to move forward with scheduling that public hearing for 5.5-72, which we would do them concurrently with the registry because it's the same section, but that would be the action we'd be looking for to move forward with the public hearing on that section as well.
Is there any way that you could screen a house to know how many people are actually there? And when they get their permit, are they telling us it's going to be 2 people here, it's going to be 6 people here?
It's tough. So what we do is we do a couple of things. We check the number of bedrooms versus the approved septic to make sure that those match. The next thing we'll do is we'll check those the Airbnbs and the VRBO sites to make sure they're not advertising for more bedrooms than they have. And then what we're planning to do is, as well now, is make sure that in the house, before people are renting that they know that there is a limitation on that number that are there in the household. Other than that, it is very hard for us to monitor. You know, you're only allowed to have 12 and you have 13. You know, it's really tough for us to be able to monitor that to that degree. But through those kind of safeguards, we try to keep that number, you know, where it is supposed to be.
What if they change their septic system to allow more people. How do we address that? Do they have to reapply? And then, because we should know once they apply for it through the health department, and then they're supposed to come through your department, shouldn't they have to reapply at that point?
Yeah, so what happens a lot of times is before we sign off on their ability to do the special use permit, that flag will pop up that, hey, you've advertised for 4 bedrooms, your septic is only for 3. You either need to change your notice that you're advertising for, 4 bedrooms, or you need to go to the health department and get that septic system modified to match the number of bedrooms. So that's kind of how we'll flag it at this point, to make sure they're in compliance with the number of bedrooms that are allowed.
And I really like Tim's idea about the permit. So you need, if I want to change the language from 2 adults over the age of 5 to just 2 persons, period, per bedroom, I need to make a motion to change that in the public hearing in May.
Correct. You can make that motion now, I guess, and then whatever decision's made, we could incorporate that into what's advertised.
Because right now, what we're going to do in our public hearing is just what's on 5.5-72, correct?
Correct. For that, to leave it the way it is, 2 adults, which is basically a person over 5.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to make a motion that in our public hearing in May, that we amend 5.5-72 to require a occupancy permit with how many people are allowed, fire evacuation plan, what the fines are if they break any of these rules. And also, instead of being 2 adults over the age of 5, I'd like to see it be 2 persons, period, no matter what the age, which will prevent multiple couples renting one house and having multiple children, which is a huge life safety concern of mine. And the fellow firefighters in this county they have expressed their concerns with that as well with some of the meetings we've had with Chief Dempsey. So I'd like to make a motion that those 2 items be changed in our public hearing in May.
Would you add bullet C
The septic?
to your motion?
I can.
Please.
Also, I'll just restate it, Madeline, for you. So I'd like to make a motion that in our public hearing in May, occupancy permit be posted, which tells you how many people are allowed, an evacuation plan, and the fines be posted if these rules are broken. Change the language from 2 adults over the age of 5 to 2 persons, no matter the age, allowed per bedroom. And if the septic is altered, they have to go through the registry and reapply as a short-term rental all over again.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have one problem with that. Is there a state or federal standard saying when a child is an adult?
I don't know the answer to, I don't know if the health department has a number on that or not. I
I
can
was gonna say,
certainly.
if we change it, are we in violation of something ourselves? Because I know everywhere you go, everybody's got a standard about what they consider a child and what they consider an adult. So are we gonna get backlash from this because we decided to rule out 5? I mean, what I'm trying to say is there a standard, federal, state, whatever, when you're considered an adult and when you're considered a child?
And I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out from the
Okay.
health department prior to the public hearing, so I'll let you know. I think if we advertise the more restrictive, then I think we're able to fall back to the way it is now, with the.
So we really can't vote on that.
But we're
adult
voting
thing
to
then.
schedule the public hearing, so,
schedule the public hearing.
you're not voting to approve it yet, just to schedule the public
Okay.
hearing for next month.
Well, I just thought the way you do an amendments, I just want to make sure that this was straight, because I want to know if there's any state or federal standards considered what's an adult and what's not.
And I don't know the answer, so I'll
Okay.
try to find that from the health department.
And if we change it to just persons, wouldn't that alleviate your concern, Mr. Cundiff?
No, because we don't know, like I said, the state or the federal standards of what
Might have a
is
carve
considered.
out for
I
small
can't
children.
use just the word person, because person covers a big band of something. Not being smart with you.
You're
don't
not,
think I
no.
am. But I just want to make sure we're not going in the waters that we don't need to try to tread into.
I will get an answer and see if there is a requirement
Okay, that'd be just fine.
based on the age.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to consider an amendment to this to also take in consideration couples with small children, babies that will, in effect, will not be tapping your septic system because they're still in diapers. I think that needs to fall in consideration too. I don't think we can consider that, if it's an infant and they're not taxing the septic system. I think that's where it's got to come into. It has to be a small child old enough to that they are taxing the septic system. I don't think that we can ask a couple, a man and wife that has a small infant, that they've got to put that infant into another room. We've got to take that in consideration, and I like to make sure that we do consider that.
My two persons thing is not in regards to septic, it's in regards to life safety just as much.
And I understand that too, but we also need to consider that when we make this decision, that we don't want to make it to the point where a couple feels like they can't come here and stay here and utilize short-term rentals where available, because we're not going to let them, if they have a small child, we're going to make them have to put that small child into a room to themselves. We need to make sure we take all that consideration.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Thompson, do you have any comments? Are you still with us, Mr. Thompson?
I think he's off the call.
Okay. All right. We have a motion, and do we have we did have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. County Attorney, I mean, are you comfortable with what I'm proposing?
Yeah, that's something we need to work out.
I understand where you're coming from. You got a 6-month-old. You're going to say that the 6-month-old has to have their own bedroom?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying,
You actually are.
well, if there's 5 bedrooms, there's 10 persons, period. No matter the age, yeah. I'm not saying that the infant has to stay in a separate bedroom. I would never imply that at all. What I'm saying is just, I just like to keep the number of people in these homes, so when there is an emergency there, our firefighters aren't having to crawl through a 8,000 square foot home trying to find adults, children, babies. It's just, we don't have the resources to do that in Franklin County.
I understand a 5-bedroom, but what about a 2? That's right. What you're suggesting, I think, is that you want to modify what it is that we advertise in the public hearing. If that's the information you're giving us through your motion to this. But we have to have it in the form that we want it to go to the public and want it to be advertised in. And it's difficult for us from a drafting standpoint to, to hit it all.
Right.
We can't say, well, if there's 2 bedrooms, you can do this, or if there's 3 bedrooms, you can do that. I mean, I guess you could, but you still are not going to be able to cover everything, unfortunately. So my concern is, the classic example would be the grandparents who rent a 3-bedroom, and their son and his wife bring their 6-month-old, and their daughter and her husband bring their 6-month-old. They violate your rule.
So
I don't think that's what you want to happen.
No,
So I'm trying to figure.
What I'm trying to do is prevent people from filling these houses up with as many people as they possibly can, so that the rent's not so expensive, and putting a strain on our services, basically.
And I agree, but I think if you look back at the way it was written initially, at the 5-year, everything above 5 years being counted as an adult, that was kind of what was in mind, was the idea that you had the very young children that came in. Now, is 5 the right number? That's
so. Do you
that's
make
the
it
decision of the board? But the bottom line is, from a drafting standpoint, it's going to be difficult for us to make both of those work, the way you're saying it and the way Mr. Tatum's saying it.
Yeah.
So if we
And
can
Mr.
get
Tatum's
into,
right. I mean, I was never implying that if you got an infant or any 1 years old or younger sleep in a different room, and I understand that. Tim's a firefighter. When we have to go in to these homes when they're on fire, this is as far as you can see right here.
I get
And
that.
we're killing ourselves. We average 100 firefighters a year that die. A lot of them die searching homes for people. So we get there and the mom and dad comes out screaming, "Oh, we've got 7 kids in here. We couldn't get them out." Well, we feel obligated to go in and get them out. That's why I'm making it such a big issue.
And I'm not questioning that at all, Mr. Mitchell. And in fact, what I might suggest, knowing nothing about the field, would be that having the 1 or 2 year old in the bedroom with the parents probably gives it the best chance of getting that kid out, because they're not going to leave.
Yeah, because they can't walk. And
Yeah.
if they can't walk, yeah.
There's probably it seems to me that there's an age number in here that we can get comfortable with, as far as saying counting as a person age such and above. Clearly 5 is not one that you're comfortable with, and we know that a child, an infant, is not going to be one that Mr. Tatum's comfortable with.
Right.
So however we can get to that would make
2?
Split the difference.
Split the difference? 3? Yeah. It just, I know for a fact that there's multiple couples renting these houses, and they're packing them to the max. They're sleeping on couches, or sleeping in chairs, sleeping on the floor, and blankets on the floor. And it's just
I've heard of people doing that at the beach, and I've heard of it.
Well, and it gets down to the number permitted by septic permit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your occupancy number that we're looking at. And I think it is just, it's the age thing, if you will, the way it's been codified, I think, which was in the spirit of what both of you all are saying. So it seems to me that what you would want to do is identify if that age is the right number that you prefer to see. Fairly stated, Mr. Gwynn?
Yeah, we just have to figure out, you just help us with what the number
Yeah.
is. Because that's, we're scriveners.
Good with 3.
3? So can we change it to 3,
Change it from 5
please?
to 3.
I still say you need to check.
That's going back to Mr.
You need
And I'm
to
good
check.
with checking, absolutely, Mr. Cuniff.
BDH has a different standard. and
Sure.
You may want to stick with that.
I'm perfectly okay with
Yeah,
that.
it's
And I don't
not-
want to do anything that would interfere with Mr. Gwynn.
Yes.
And I really appreciate Mr. Cuniff bringing it up.
So
Thank you,
I
Jim.
guess I don't know if you finished your motion, but
I'll second the
to
motion.
amend your motion would be to age of 3, change the age of 5 to the age of 3.
Yeah.
Is that
Provided
As long
there's
as it's
not a
allowed.
federal or state regulation that prohibits
correct?
it.
And I'll find that out if there is any restriction on that.
I'm almost afraid to ask for any more discussion. So let's proceed with the motion.
Okay, so at the moment, the amended motion that I have is, for the Board of Supervisors to schedule a public hearing to amend the Franklin County Code 5.5 and include language in regards to the occupancy permits to be posted, which was Mr. Tatum's, including the fines that would be included if those were to be broken. Change the language of the number of people above the age of 3, as long as it complies with VDH and any other regulation. And also, if the septic of the building is changed, the applicants must go through the process of the short-term rentals once again with the planning department, which was what, kind of getting on the septic, and if people up the amount of threshold.
Well,
or
my
whatever.
position was more so that before we grant permission, that we understand what the septic, if it's,
We have verification from
if
the
it's
health department.
verified before they get their certificate.
Okay, so
But-
before and not,
I think before and if it changes.
And yeah, and/or, yeah.
okay, before, okay, I'm gonna add
Yeah.
and before, and then include if it changes, though.
Mr.
And that
Mitchell,
was a motion, which was amended multiple times. I have by Supervisor Mitchell, and I have the second by Supervisor Smith as it was amended.
And Jim has something, Madam.
Can we make sure we understand that what you're asking us to do is to make those changes in the motion, I mean, in the draft ordinance, and then to advertise the
Yes.
draft ordinance for a public hearing next meeting with those changes?
And it could still be changed.
And Mr. Mitchell predicated his motion with that language, but it kind of got lost in everything that's been discussed since. Yeah. Yeah.
That was my next question. Are you okay with the changes to your motion?
Yes, because last thing I want to do is step on Mr. Cuniff, Mr. Tatum's. If they're comfortable with that, and I agree with Mr. Cuniff 100%, we need to check with VDH. I know Tim's been in there in the situations that I've been in with our fellow firefighters, and it's just, I don't think you guys understand the passion that these men and women have, and they're going to feel obligated. I know they are. I know them. And the better we can protect the people coming to enjoy our county, and the more we can protect our fire departments, the happier I'm going to be. So I am good to proceed.
When would you call the vote, please?
Yes. So with what we just discussed, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Cundiff?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum?
Yes.
Supervisor Thompson on the line? Thank you. And Chairman Mitchell?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm.
Time for a break.
Can we?
Okay, moving on to the next one was the fines for noncompliance. So we talked before about how there's local code and there's the Code of Virginia. Code of Virginia for civil penalties allows the locality to increase for $200 per occurrence of a civil penalty and $5,000 total. Our ordinance currently has $100 and $3,000, so we're below what the maximums, the maximum allows. What we had considered was moving our local code to match the state code with regard to those civil penalties, as well as criminal penalties, which under Class 1 misdemeanor, the state allows a fine not more than $2,500 and/or 12 months in jail for a Class 1 misdemeanor. What we had proposed as staff was to bring our local ordinance in line with the state ordinance, but I think just quickly talking to our county attorney, I think an alternative would be to simply say that those penalties will be as per the state code as amended. That way, we're not putting numbers in there that might change in the future, and we have to change them again. Does that make sense? So basically, we would say that those two sections for civil penalties and criminal penalties would follow those allowed by Virginia code.
Which is 200 and 5,000 respectively.
Currently. Correct, but that could change,
Thank you.
at any time. But if we just say ours matches the state, then we can go up and down according to the state.
Mr. Sandy, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I am not, I know that we're Dillon's rural state, and that's why the suggestion's being made. I don't like the latitude of the language that's in the proposed amendment. There is a lot of latitude between $10 and $2,500 and 12 months in jail. There's a lot of latitude, and it's ambiguous, and it leaves it to the judgment of whoever, the judge that's putting the enforcement in place. And I would ask probably Mr. Gwynn to weigh in if it's possible that we set the fine rather than to have a range of fine. I know what you're going to say.
So you're under 25-800, is that the one particular?
That's correct.
You're talking about, that'd be the
Yeah.
Class 1 misdemeanor.
Once we establish it as a Class 1 misdemeanor, the state code takes over from there.
That's okay. I'm just asking.
Understand?
We're gonna take a short break, and we'll get back to this discussion in a few minutes. We're gonna take 5. If we can do it in 4, we'll do it in 4.
Pray for 10.
Just to continue the discussion relative to fines for noncompliance for short-term rentals, and And actually, I guess I should say, it would not apply only to short-term rentals, it would apply to any of the.
Welcome and thank you for choosing freeconferencecall.com. You're helping
There's
people
Ronnie.
around the world.
Communicate for free. There are 2 participants in the conference.
And there's your
Goodbye.
there's your PSA.
Perfect.
Okay. So where we were at was, we had a draft proposal to amend section 25 to address the fines for noncompliance. We had proposed to make the local ordinance match those fines per state code. It was a suggestion of the county attorney that we simply just say that the local fines would be as prescribed in the Code of Virginia as amended. Something to that degree, rather than actually listing a number that we might have to change again in the future. So I'll be happy to answer any questions on that. Otherwise, we'd like a motion to schedule public hearings. This one will be a little different because it's section 25, so it would need to go to the Planning Commission for a recommendation and a public hearing first. But if you initiate that through a motion, we'll schedule that with the Planning Commission and bring it back to you in June.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman, that we refer to the Planning Commission to support a public hearing on the fine portion. I'm not sure, Mr. Sandy, what section this is.
It's chapter 25 of the code.
25,800.
Chapter 25.
Looks like 25-800 and 25-800.1.
Thank you.
So relative to the criminal and civil penalties.
Yeah, that's my motion.
Any other discussion? You need a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Now, we're dealing with section 25-800, and, so, Madam Clerk? if you-
800.1 also.
Okay, we're ready for a roll call with the motion made by Supervisor Smith.
Yes, if you'd read it.
So the motion that I have is to refer to the Planning Commission in regards to the public hearing in chapter 25, and move forward with scheduling the public hearing based on their recommendations.
Yes, so just to be clear, the Planning Commission would be holding a public hearing in May to discuss the item.
Supervisor Mitchell? Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Condit? Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum?
Yes.
Chairman Mitchell?
Yes.
Is Mr. Thompson with us? No.
I believe that's really the final action item. The next one talks about uniform regulations. We addressed that in section 5.5 when we talked about the safety and the number of bedrooms and those sorts of things. So I think we've covered that there. The final item was the taxing, and as I mentioned at the last meeting, the General Assembly has passed legislation to give equal taxing authority to counties. So whereas you used to have to ask for permission to raise your occupancy tax 2%, now the General Assembly has passed that. I'm a little hesitant because they have the governor and they have their session tomorrow. I'm not sure how that might change or if that will change. So I think the way I would like to leave that one is let's see what they do with it tomorrow to adopt it, and then we can come back to you with recommendations on what to do with that. I think the bottom line would be is if you want to raise that, you're going to need to hold a public hearing to raise it from 5% to 7%. Probably no matter what the General Assembly does, you would need to do that. Worst case is you'd have to go back to the General Assembly and ask them to amend the Code of Virginia to give you specific authority. But it looks like that authority will pass, but I would just ask maybe we hold off another month to see what the General Assembly actually does with it. And then we can give you better guidance with that in the future. So that's really it for attachment 10, those items and those action items that you've passed. We can move to attachment 11. I know there was an initial request that be delayed until a future date. So I guess it's the board's pleasure if we want to move forward on discussing attachment 11, or to what degree we want to discuss it.
Mr. Chairman.
I would like to go back to consent agenda item number 2. do we need to approve that?
We did that. We did that as part of attachment 10. That was the second item.
We approved it, each item at the time.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to Section 11, there, as Mr. Sandy said, there was some notion earlier in the meeting to defer this. I would be a proponent of dealing with this today because it deals with code language and all that we're setting ourselves in process to remediating. And the crux of this really is for RPDs and PCDs, where there are by right uses codified for short-term rentals. My basic suggestion is that all short-term rentals, and I started out with PCDs and RPDs, but, all short-term rentals in the county, I think, should have a due diligence process attached to them, as we do in A1, where there are 2 triggered public hearings, there's staff due diligence, and then we do our due diligence as well as the Planning Commission. So I don't know that this is a very difficult task for us to take on today, other than just acknowledging if we can come to some agreement on not having by right use for short-term rentals.
I agree with Ms. Smith. We're going to have a very busy meeting in May, and my wife will, if our son is not here by then, it's going to be very close. I might not be here, and I'm very passionate about this. And as you guys can see from your emails, there's a lot of people worried about it. So I think we owe it to the citizens that are most concerned about this to really put the ball in our court when it comes to short-term rentals. That way we can look and see how close is the short-term rental to the next door neighbors. And but I agree with Ms. Smith.
Comment on our agenda. This says no action. This is supposed to be a discussion, and I yield to the attorney. I'm under the impression that we can bring this to a vote if we want to.
My understanding was, based on our discussion last time, was that there was going to be a discussion, and then at the end of the discussion, presumably a recommendation for us to go back and do what we did last month as far as bringing you the potential amendments to the code and how we would address it this time. So from that standpoint, the discussion is however long you want it to be. If you want us to go and bring back proposed amendments that you could then approve to go to a public hearing in June, I mean, we know what you want, if that's what everybody wants.
I'm just trying to
Well,
follow.
we'd get it to the Planning Commission first and then get it back to you.
I'm just trying to follow the agenda.
I understand. But my sense of it is that as we're getting later in the day, and I think that's one of the things that's pushing up against it, that it's simply a matter of, we were looking for some guidance.
Any change, Mr. Thompson? Are you with us? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think I could boil it down to maybe a few things if you want to move forward with the discussion.
I have one comment I'd like to make in regard to Ms. Smith's comment. I agree that we need to keep a close watch and a close hand on our short-term rentals, and don't have a problem with requiring a special use permit in zoned areas, but I would be against requiring the same special use permit in the non-zoned areas of Franklin County. I think we need to leave them out of that. Now, short-term rentals in the non-zoned areas are still required to come up and pay their fees and be on the registry and everything else, but I don't think that we should require a special use permit for short-term rentals in like Fairham.
That's a good point of
Yeah,
clarification,
I'm glad you
Mr.
brought that up.
Tatum.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll fall back on what Mr. Thompson really said. I'd rather see this table for next meeting.
Mr. Thompson did make a request if he was not able to be with us, that he would like to have opportunity to speak to it.
I think that was his biggest request, was he'd like to be here so he could speak and talk. Because I think in this issue, I think everybody should do their own opinion, but we need all to be here to do it.
I think what Mr. Sandy's asking for is for us to give them the go-ahead to construct and bring back to us next month, and then we discuss it next month and make a decision. We're just giving them the green light to go ahead and construct or reconstruct, as you would have it, an ordinance that they can fix and bring back to us. And that way, Mr. Thompson would be here and would have a chance to voice his opinion, but at least we're moving in that direction. I don't see a need in putting off letting Mr. Gwynn and Mr. Sandy go ahead and draft the ordinance and then if we decide we need to change what they bring, we can change it, but at least have something to keep the ball moving forward.
So what do you need from the board today?
Well, I guess if you want us to draft something, we just need to know what it is you want to draft. So if I can kind of boil it down, I think there's four main things that I kind of boiled it down to is that I've heard in the letters and in the communication that people are interested in. And one of those would be requiring short-term rentals in RPD to get a special use permit. And the second one would be requiring short-term rentals in PCD to get a special use permit. And then the other two, which if Logan could go down one slide, the other two things I've heard discussed are potentially setback requirements. So an example would be my neighbor wants to do short-term rentals, but their house is only 50 feet from my house. If we set a 100-foot setback requirement, that person would not be able to rent their house for short-term rental. And those numbers, I'm just throwing those numbers out, but that's kind of the scenario of setting some sort of setback requirement. The other one would be a minimum lot size requirement. So same idea, my neighbor wants to do it. My neighbor has 0.8 acres, but the minimum lot size requirement that this board established was 1 acre. And so that person on 0.8 acres may not be able to do the short-term rental. So those are kind of the four decision points, I think, that I've heard. There may be many others, but I think those are the four primarily that I've heard, making those uses special use permits in those other two districts that currently allow them by right, and then looking at some sort of setback requirement and some sort of minimum lot size requirement. So,
well, if you're looking for consent on what we need to do, then I think Mr. Thompson needs to be here, because this is an implication of going forward, and he's not here to give his opinion on it. And I think out of respect, we should table this matter.
Well, we're just asking for language to be brought back, and that's when he really needs to be part of the conversation.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If he's asking for language now. So if you're going to give language now, why can't Mr. Thompson have his turn and tell him what we need to give language to?
Well, he was on the phone, Mr. Conduct.
I know, but something's happened to his wife or something's happened. I don't know. I don't know the whole answer to that story.
So we can certainly come back with some sort of recommendation or draft something for those four different criteria and bring that back for the full board to react to.
Can you go back to that previous slide, please, Steve? Yeah.
So much of the correspondence you got from Water's Edge, the folks, and that's primarily who you got the correspondence from, was much of that was looking for this board to establish a special use permit requirement, basically for any short-term rental in the zoned area. In the zoned area, I'll clarify that. And so currently we allow them by right in PCD and RPD, so it would really be changing the zoning to say you're no longer allowed to do those by right in those districts. You would need a special use permit to do that. We can certainly draft those changes, bring them back. You would still have to have a public hearing. It would still have to go to the Planning Commission. I think at next month's meeting or a future meeting, we would be just looking for guidance on, yes, go with this one. Yes, go with this one. Do not go with this change. Change a 100-foot setback to 200 feet, whatever the pleasure of the board is in that regard. So we could certainly do that, and then Mr. Thompson certainly would have time to comment and react on that. You would still need to schedule a public hearing at that point, and it would still have to go to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation as well.
Yes, sir. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is by doing this through zoning, you have the grandfather problem. So when Steve talks about his neighbor at the 100-foot setback, if they are already by right, they're grandfathered. We don't, we can't setback, we don't do the setback on them. So now, if they don't do it for 2 years, then the grandfathering runs out. But I don't want you to think that we're going to be able to do this ordinance and cure the problem. Retroactively. It's going to take some time into the future to get it done because of that. The other thing that is possible and perhaps probable based on what we're hearing is that by taking this action, you're going to have people who are going to try to get into the short-term rental business quicker while we're working on it, while they're by right, so they can say, yes, we were doing it and we therefore are grandfathered, including perhaps expanding it. So there is.
Ask a question about that, Jim.
Sure.
So these by right people that we are going to eliminate, that would address areas like Water's Edge where they allow short-term rentals. So now, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Say that again, Mr. Sandy.
If you're currently renting, if you're currently engaging in short-term rentals and you're in an RPD or a PCD and we come in and change it and say it's a special use permit, it does not affect you because you're grandfathered in.
Understood.
Yeah. Right, yeah, unless you have that 2-year gap.
Understood.
So the people who are currently doing it by right, Mr. Carr, yeah, you're not going to be able to do anything with that if they continue.
So if we decide today to move forward with this and Mr. Thompson's not here, we still have the right to change this and adjust it at the next thing.
At that point, you'll actually have something in front of you to change.
Okay.
You don't have anything in front of you right now. With all due respect to the Water's Edge people who have submitted what they would like to see, but you don't have anything from us in front of you at this point. So no, you're not making any decision as to which way you're going. You're simply putting yourself in a position to talk about it, I think, in more detail and with a little more knowledge.
Okay.
All right, what's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to vote on it today? Do you want to put it off, or what are we?
I think a consensus
I think
guidance.
we've had enough. You're okay?
Well, I think what we'll come back with is those 4 potential changes. I guess if you have a recommendation on setback and lot size, we can incorporate that. But again, it can be changed in the future. So if anyone had a particular suggestion as a minimum lot size or a setback, we'll incorporate that and use that as a starting point for discussion.
100 feet and 1 acre sounds.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Lori?
Yes.
And again, that could certainly be changed. Probably have at
place to
least
start anyways.
Probably have at least 2 opportunities to change because you still will have to schedule a public hearing and then actually hold the public hearing as well before you vote on it.
Yeah, I definitely want
The
Mr.
Planning Commission
Thompson's.
will have to have their public hearing also.
Definitely want Mr. Thompson's feedback.
Yes.
This is, it's important that all 7 of us are comfortable with any codification changes, like we're suggesting. But I just think that we're going to accomplish that by the way the process is set up.
Well, I still say, Mr. Thompson's not here, should be tabled. You got these right here in front of you, okay? So these are the language already pre-constructed before we even have a discussion. So I still say Mr. Thompson should be here.
I would ask for a consensus, Mr. Chairman, so we can move on.
Could I make one comment? I agree with everything Mr. Cundiff is saying, and I would like for Mr. Thompson to have a voice in this, but I think based on my understanding from the county attorney and Mr. Sandy, it's not dyed in the wool. So when they come back with this, hopefully Mr. Thompson will be here. And if we want to make changes at that point in time, we can.
We'll come back with a draft for discussion.
But what are you going to use for your draft?
The 4 items we talked about will show how the ordinance would have to be changed to allow PCD to require short-term rentals to get a special use permit in PCD and RPD. and we'll show what the draft language would look like to set a minimum setback and a minimum lot size.
But are you going on the recommendations that you've received through emails? The majority of the people in the county in the zoned areas have no idea what we're talking about. I'm talking about when you get out into the rural areas of the districts that are zoned, these people should have a voice in it also.
Sure, and I think what we would have as part of your next agenda packet would be some draft language that people could react to and discuss. If it's the board's consensus for our staff to move forward in that direction, we'll do what the board wants.
And Mr. Sandy, the public hearing would be advertised, and in the advertisement itself, it articulates the purpose of the public hearing, which gives the public due notice that if this is important to you, check the website, call staff, talk to a board member, to get up to speed on it. Is that a safe assumption?
Yes, yeah, I would say whatever we propose for next month would still be a discussion item. It would not be anything to move forward for approval at that point. Again,
So,
it's up to the board's pleasure.
That's the same as tabling it.
Well, I think what maybe the county attorney suggested was just actually have some language to actually react to.
What's a pleasure?
Well, I'm still saying table.
I want to proceed.
I think we need to proceed with what
I
Mr.
like to
Sanders
proceed as
asking.
well.
I'm not ready to proceed. I don't know what the rest of them are.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we can ask for a show of hands on who's in support of directing staff to draft the request that we were speaking of. It's hard for me to tell who is in.
I agree.
I don't necessarily need to take a form, if Mr. Gwynn, we don't necessarily need to take a formal vote, but if I can just see a show of hands for those who are willing to proceed and direct the planning department to draft this ordinance.
Oops, excuse me.
For discussion.
For discussion.
For discussion, yeah.
Okay, and those against? Mr. Gwynn, if it falls to a 3-3.
Motion failed.
So do you want to, at this point, carry that item over to the next month's agenda? Would that be?
I guess the motion fails. We would have to do another motion to bring it back, and I don't know whether any of us are qualified to bring it back or not.
It's not a motion,
It's not-
Mr. Chairman.
Since it wasn't a vote, I think I would refer to Mr. Gwynn, but.
At this point, you've basically carried it over to the next meeting without staff coming back with any sort of recommendation for you. So you're going to talk about it when we get back. And then at that point, give us some guidance as to what it is you want us to do.
Just delays it
anything.
another month. It just basically delays it another month.
It carries it over another month. And I think that's where you are from that standpoint.
Well, I think we need some clarification
Well,
as to, we had a tie vote, which is a no vote.
Yeah, but presumably, but there wasn't a motion you were voting on, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I mean, at this point, I guess at this point, there probably ought to be a motion a motion to table is going to end up in the same place. It's
I
going to
yield
fail.
I yield to you.
This is sort of an unexpected one. I'm thinking on as I'm standing here. Right. Right. Well, but the request was to go ahead and consider it in Mr. Thompson's absence. So in that case, The opposite of that would be to wait until he's present to consider it.
That's fine.
That work?
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, in that case, do we need a motion or a second to go with Mr. Thompson's motion to actually table this till next month to make it official?
I guess we can just let the vote stand.
We don't need to.
It's not a vote.
The consensus stands. Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, Director of Public Works. We'll be looking at attachment number 12.
Coming on for several years. At the February meeting, we requested permission from you to go out and get bids. Closure construction of landfill number 72. The bid was properly advertised, and we had a mandatory pre-bid meeting. There were 11 prospective bidders at that meeting. The bid was divided into 3 options. One was the AgriTurf, the AstroTurf that I've been showing you guys for a couple of years. The other options were a GCL and a soil cap, which are all approved by the DEQ and we have approved in our closure plans. We've received bids from 3 different companies. 2 of those companies submitted bids on 2 of the options. No one submitted a bid on the complete soil cap option. You have a summary of those bids, I believe, in your package. Terrahawk LLC submitted the low overall bid for the options, which was a bid of $3,389,864 to construct the geosynthetic cap. That does not require as much dirt. It does require dirt. It has the same kind of liner under it that we have under the new landfill. It'll be that kind of setup. I contacted both contractors that had done previous landfill work for us. They were at the pre-bid. One of them told me that he already had a big job and he couldn't bid it. And the other one thought that the liner companies were going to be very cheap on this job, and so they didn't bid it. Obviously, looking at the numbers, cheap was not in anybody's vocabulary.
That's true with anything now.
The geosynthetic cap that we're going with or requesting you guys to approve is a good cap. That contractor has found a source of dirt to supply the dirt that he needs. Like I said, these prices are completely reversed from what we anticipated. For the $2 million difference, we can mow a lot of grass. I mean, that's the big difference. We were looking at not having to do any maintenance, you know.
This is Ronnie Thompson calling back in. Hi, Ronnie, can you hear us?
I can hear you now, yes. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're required to maintain this for at least 30 years. But still, mowing grass 2 or 3 times a year and taking care of some ditches is far less than that $2 million difference going from the clay cap to the AstroTurf. We've done research on the company that it was low bid. All the folks that we talked to came back with good results. They did their jobs on time and on budget. So we feel like they'll be a good contractor for the job. We're asking you today to approve us moving forward with getting a contract with them, working with Mr. Gwynn to get a contract to get them started. That was one of our big things. We want to get it done this building season. We have to have it done by next June. We don't want them trying to rush through the winter, fighting winter weather, trying to do this project. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Smith, do we have a current status on their temporary contractor's license?
Well, that's our problem. We talked to DPOR in Richmond. There's nobody in the office hardly to answer.
Of
That's been
course.
our problem. They have said that they will do this to get through this period. The DPO, the temporary won't even start until Richmond reopens. But they have said that they will allow us, since they have a Class A in North Carolina, a heavy civil, that they will allow us to do this.
Can you
Okay.
find somebody with
Can you
a
hear us?
Class A in
Yes.
Franklin County
this
that would
is-
let them work under their license?
Well,
Larry
not,
Bertolet.
not and bond the job properly.
One moment, Larry. Larry
Okay, thanks.
Bertolet just has called in.
Okay. Yeah, Larry from Labella, who has helped us with this, we have him if there's any questions for him also.
So does that change our post-work liability on the county, piggybacking on the North Carolina license?
Not sure what you're asking me. No, they can't. They can start the work, but by Virginia code to do the work outside of this unique circumstance we're in, they have to have a Class A to do the work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you're saying that you would be over here, sorry. You're thinking now instead of the AstroTurf, I'm a little confused. Instead of AstroTurf, you want to sow it in grass and just maintain it?
Yeah, we're gonna, it will still have a clay that's in a thin bag underneath. Then it'll have 18 inches of dirt. Then it has another thin synthetic, and then it has the topsoil on top. Yes, we will have to mow some grass now. With the AstroTurf, we were not gonna have to do anything.
So a tractor and a batwing would take care of it?
Yeah, that or the skid steer that we have with our big bush hog on it.
So we already have a piece of equipment to mow it with?
Yes, and like I said, for that $2 million difference.
The $2 million is just for the AstroTurf versus seed?
Correct. Like I said, I expected it to be flipped the other way, and that's just not the way it came in this time.
And what is the restrictions on mowing? Do they have a certain height or a certain time? of the year?
No, there's no height, not that I've seen anywhere. The main thing is just to keep it from eroding. That's the big thing. Keep it from eroding down, because you don't want it to get down below that 6 inches of topsoil to that first synthetic layer.
Mm-hmm.
And so long as you just have grass stabilized, you can't have any trees growing on it, obviously.
Right.
But no, there's not a specific height. So we're envisioning 2 or 3 mowings a year, and it should be fine.
So you still have to wrap it with a liner. So you just can't go in there, because you already have dirt on top of it from where you dug out of the new landfill site, right?
Yes, there is dirt there, and they will be able to use a large portion of that dirt. It does have to have some structural strength. The backside where we have all the mulch on it that prevented the erosion, they'll have to strip that mulch off. They'll have to add a little bit of dirt back there. And then, like I said, this bentonite basically in a thin bag is the first layer that they put over this. Then they'll put 18 inches more of dirt, then a thin plastic membrane, and then the 6 inches of topsoil. The hard, tricky part to this, and once again, we went over this with the engineer to make sure he understood, when they're doing those bentonite bags, as soon as they cover that area, they have to get dirt on it. That can't be exposed to rain or something like that and have them, blow up.
So we're voting on 3.3 versus 5.3 million.
Correct.
And you like the 3.3 million, and you feel you have the equipment and staff to maintain it.
Correct.
Okay.
What do you,
Nutshell.
what do you sow it in?
What will we sow it in?
Yeah.
I would probably think some kind of tall fescue.
Rye.
In my mind, being a farmer, you can let that stuff grow up and seed out, and you don't have to replenish it every year.
Yeah.
But I don't think they'll let you do that.
Right. Well, I mean, again, it's basically called the non-erosion layer. That's the big thing. You're just trying to keep it from eating into your dirt, and on those big slopes, that's going to take some pretty good stuff.
Well, you could sow it Johnson grass. Always come back.
Definitely grows.
Yeah, definitely.
Just plant corn on it.
Okay. Any more
Do you need a
discussion?
motion? Does he need a motion?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we stand behind Mr. Smith and whatever he thinks is the best for the landfill. I'll make a motion that we approve the 3.3 million and then maintain it.
Get a contract written with Mr.
Get a
Gwynn.
contract written with Mr. Gwynn. Contingent upon class.
The verbiage that Mr. Bertolet had in his letter, we're going to include in that, and that'll take care of that.
How many acres is the landfill, the part we want to cover up? How many acres is in that?
That we're getting ready to do?
Yes.
It's about 24.
How much?
24 acres.
24.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Any more discussion?
I have just one quick question, if I may. Mr. Smith, on the monitoring, the 30 years monitoring, are all of those in place?
Yes,
They're currently in place?
We're currently in what's called corrective action. We
Right.
had bad groundwater. Just this month, I managed to get one of the pesticides dropped off of our list. We haven't had it for 3 years. That's going to save us almost $2,500 a year in sampling.
Good.
But until all the rest of them are gone, and they are diminishing each year. In that 30-year period, if we drop below what's called the groundwater protection standards, we can do away with our pump and treat system where we're treating the water now and drop back to just about, we have about 10 wells that are called sentinel wells that we have to check. Just if they get clean, we can get rid of one whole arc of issues.
Oh, well, that would be optimal.
Yeah, but now,
Yeah.
at the end of the 30 years, if it's not clean, we have to continue until I believe we have 3 years of clean water, and then we'll be off the hook.
Okay.
But at the rate things are going now, I think we'll be okay by then.
But with the entire closure in mind, those wells are drilled?
Yeah,
and-
all that's already in
Okay,
place.
thank you.
It's all in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Did the landfill get those 5 inches of rain the other day?
Yes, we did.
How much leach did you carry off?
Pardon?
How much water did you carry off?
Well, we're still hauling. I'm already up to 300,000 gallons already, so.
How much?
About 300,000 gallons. If we had not had our new bridge in, it would probably be in Henry County right now. It came within about 2 inches of going over that one.
Really?
It was good to hear last week that it didn't wash out.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay, I'm gonna start with, Mr. Thompson, was back on the call, and he's now waiting for another call from the doctor, so he is not going to be in this vote. I have a motion made by Supervisor Mitchell to approve the 3.3 million, bid, and then I have a second by Mr. Tatum. So, Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Clements,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. Tatum,
Yes.
and Chairman Mitchell.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Don? The quick
Thank you,
question.
Larry.
The,
Sure,
you had
thank you.
said one time about the oil prices affecting the cover.
Yeah.
And when oil is at minus,
It's zero, yeah.
at zero, didn't help a bit, did it?
No, but I talked to him. I said, this is what you told us. And the guy said, well, it'll be a year. He said, we already have all this made, and it'll be a year before we actually see a reflection on that. But it wasn't so much the cost of the liner. There was not enough dirt for a general contractor to make any money off the dirt moving, so they were marking the liner price up as much as $1 million. And that's the catch-22 we got in.
Well,
Thank you for being on
appreciate you.
top of that.
Hey, Don, before you sit down, I went by Grassy Hill a couple weeks ago. It was a mess. I didn't call you, but your guys got up there and cleaned it up. I mean, it's spotless. Thank you so much.
And, you know, none of my guys are at home every other day, anything. We're still 7 days a week. It would mean a lot if you're out and around. You could run by a collection site or something and say, we appreciate it, because they feel a little down right now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well,
Thank you.
I want you to know, Saturday afternoon, I dumped the at Glade Hill. I got there and picked up everything around it.
Yeah, okay.
Trying to save tax money.
Okay.
We
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Have gloves. Okay. County Administrator, Mr. Whitlow.
This evening, I've seen your faces in some time. I've heard your voices over the last few weeks, but I haven't seen some of your faces, and it's good to actually see your faces during this time in our history as the county. And I stood before you about 5 weeks ago on March the 17th and presented a proposed FY 2021 county budget. And of course, at the time, we knew a little bit about where we were headed into the state of affairs with the COVID-19 virus, but certainly we did not know really what we know today. And we will not know today what we'll know tomorrow, and so forth for some times it would appear. So I'm before you today, not necessarily to hand deliver an entire new budget to each of you. I'm here to discuss a modified budget. This has caused all of us in Virginia, local governments, and the state government, which will reconvene tomorrow. The General Assembly reconvenes in Richmond tomorrow, to take a strategic pause, if you will, with our budgets. That's not to say all of the work that this board completed. I think we had 9 work sessions, budget work sessions, between really November and March. That was great work, and you should be proud of that work. The citizens should be proud of that work, and that work will continue. And so I will explain a little bit about that. All that is not for naught. That there are strategic initiatives in that budget that are still there. It's just we're taking a pause, likely, at looking at some of that. And so I'll explain that a little bit and how we can do that with the board, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So it's good to be with you today. Have our help from our IT department, Logan. I really appreciate all you're doing today. You did a great job last month and this month, broadcasting and running PowerPoint and all the things. Appreciate IT, certainly. So, Logan, I'll just look at you and we'll go to the next slide. History never looks like history when you live through it. That was, of course, the first slide that I shared with you all last month. And last month, maybe it was a little more cute, I would say, than how we really feel about that slide today. It's not necessarily cute, but the quote remains true. History never looks like history when you're living through it.
Thank you.
Next slide, Logan. Thought I'd take a pause now and talk about how we're going to finish out the current fiscal year. And really, Mr. Carter did an excellent job with his monthly finance report explaining that. You know, how we're going to finish the FY 1920 budget year, the current year we're in. And of course, our general property, tax collections, real estate, personal property, machinery, and tools, as Brian shared in his monthly report, we're about 99.3% of budget. Personal property, we're over budget on collections, which is good. And we see really that growth from personal property, and really that is what we think will help us land the plane at the end of this fiscal year, because we're seeing, and we will see, declines in some of these other revenue categories. Those declines in potentially in sales tax, we're already seeing that soften from the prior 2 years. And then the remainder of fiscal year 20 is unknown because we have that 2-month delay in terms of sales tax collection. So really, we will not know what March and April look like until May and June. Similarly, on meals and transient occupancy tax, we do think there will be a slight decrease in that. Or perhaps a larger decrease. We're just not sure because we have that 1-month delay. I will tell this board that if we were going to find a time in our history to weather a storm like COVID-19, this is actually probably a better time as any, both in terms of the fiscal year. We have already collected primarily our large taxes from general property taxes. And then in addition, this is a reassessment year for the county in terms of our 4-year reassessment. I would also say, as speaking with our financial advisors, in terms of the county's fiscal health, we have a very strong fund balance in Franklin County, well above the Government Finance Officers Association recommendation. That's really good. It's been good for us when we finance large projects, capital projects like Mr. Smith just shared in terms of our landfill. It gives confidence and credit to us in terms of our creditors in New York on the bond market. We are the highest rated locality in the Roanoke region in terms of our bond rating, and that is really good fiscal budgeting on the part of this board, and as Ms. Smith shared earlier in today's meeting, on previous boards of supervisors. So if there was a time in our history that this had to occur, it occurred at a favorable time. Unfortunately, it's an unfavorable thing that we're having to deal with, and we're going to have to deal with not only this fiscal year, we will likely be dealing with this for the next couple of fiscal years, primarily because of the state, but also perhaps with our local revenues. That being said, not knowing where this may go until the end of the year, we quickly, at the end of March, or really mid-March, signaled to the departments to curtail, slow down, and almost stop, if you will, non-essential spending for the remainder of the fiscal year, just to make sure that we make our budget, and that we will continually monitor that. And we are continually monitoring that. Mr. Carter, I think you mentioned earlier about some weekly updates, and we can provide that information, to the board as we go forward. So as we look at finishing out FY 19-20, we're feeling, fairly certain that we will be able to do so in the black, and which is good. As we look ahead, next slide, Logan. You've seen this before. This is Mr. Carter's monthly report. We will not dwell on this one, but you can see those percentages kind of where we are. This was on a previous presentation earlier today. Again, our percent of budget, we're looking pretty good. We're still waiting for some state revenues to come in, but we are where we should be in the current fiscal year. Next slide. Projecting fiscal year 21 prior to COVID. This is where I stood, as I said, about a month ago, really 5 weeks ago on March 17th. At the time, we were projecting to this board a projected discretionary revenue increase of $3.1 million next year. And you all will recall during that budget presentation, we were certainly pleased with that growth. However, that's not necessarily the growth that we were seeing in the 2000s in terms of our revenue and our county population, quite frankly. That's about a 5% growth in our reassessments, whereby in the 2000s, we were seeing much larger growth in terms of our tax revenues, our annual tax revenues. Now we're really only seeing maybe 0.5% to 1%. Years ago, we were seeing 7 to 8%. Post-recession, 10 years later, it is what it is. Our growth has been modest at best. Personal property, we're seeing some fairly healthy growth over the last couple of years, 3 to 4%. We were seeing that softening sales tax increase from the last couple of years. And then I shared with you the concern that I had last month, which we know now will likely occur, is the flattening interest income. There was concern, certainly if the feds would drop the rate any further, that hurts us on our interest income, and it certainly will do so. The feds now, essentially we're looking at 0% interest. I will say we've worked with our lending or our banking institution rather to try to move some funds into a money market account where we still have access to those funds and to get at least some interest earnings on that. And so we're doing everything that we can, working with the treasurer and the finance director to earn as much interest as we can on our income. However, we know next year interest has dropped, and that will be a drop for us in terms of our revenue. So next slide, Logan, as we look ahead, projecting now during COVID and what we know, this is what it looks like. While we projected $3.1 million in new discretionary revenue, now only projecting about an increase of $157,000 year over year. Essentially a flat budget. Any new revenue absorbed likely will be absorbed by our revenue losses. Those revenue declines, and Mr. Carter shared these with you earlier. Real estate collection ratio, we budget that around 97%. We're projecting that could drop to 95%. I will tell you during the recession, that collection ratio dropped. And so it's possible that will drop again. And Mr. Carter has shared to the tune of about $1 million. Personal property reduction of once anticipated revenue growth. While we were anticipating about 6% in personal property growth, we're now going to budget that to be flat. We're expecting maybe no growth there. Sales tax revenue reduction, as Mr. Carter shared, 10% reduction, a 25% reduction in meals tax, lodging tax, possibly a reduction of 50%. And while 50% sounds significant, our transient occupancy tax is a very small number. We only receive about 100,000, so I think it comes to 50. 50,000. So we're not talking a large amount of money there. Still a significant drop nonetheless. And then, of course, the interest income reduction. Now, I will say all of this, and Mr. Cundiff, I think you had asked the question, anticipating that 3 million and so forth drop, why is that, or economists and this, that, and the other. This is a guesstimate at best. Not having months of revenue data for our sales and our meals, we really will not know more until June and July. However, in speaking with the Virginia Association of Counties and Fiscal Analytics, who does a lot of work for VACO, Jim Regenball has shared with us a spreadsheet, as he's shared for other counties across the state, to really help administrators and managers and finance directors really early on try to project this thing. His analysis for Franklin County, and you can deal with the percentages and change the percentages on it. And one analysis there is it was looking at a $4 million reduction rather than a $3 million. Again, it could be more. We hope it's going to be less. We just don't know at this point. But we're trying to prepare, and we're hoping for the best. And again, trying to use that optimism and that good Franklin County grit that I've often talked about, and will continue to do so. So what does all this look like? Logan, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Before we look at the modified budget, thank you, Madeline. Before we look at the modified budget, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the state, and Brian hit on this earlier. Over 50% of the county's revenues come from the state and federal funds. It's about 53% actually. Secretary of Finance, again, in the state's projecting a $1 billion loss. Those state funding reductions are likely coming. I can't say they will, but during the recession, the state of Virginia was very famous for reducing state aid to localities. In fact, I coined the term local aid to the state. At that point, we were actually, in a sense, giving more money for state responsible budget initiatives such as schools and comp board. We're actually giving more money really to those state responsibilities. That's how the state balanced its budget. States and localities, unlike the federal government, are required to have balanced budgets. We cannot print money. We have to balance. And so it remains to be seen. The General Assembly will reconvene tomorrow. A lot of eyes will be on the Assembly over the next couple of weeks. We know, as Brian has shared, there's been a significant drop in the GDP over the first and second quarter, and certainly the future quarters, but hopefully a rebound. And so when we talked about the proposed FY budget that was presented on March the 17th, as already mentioned, we're now in a strategic pause until we really know more about local and state revenue as it becomes more clear. That being the case, what I'm coining or terming a modified FY fiscal year 21 budget, really that's now our course. That's not to say that in the summer or in the fall or each month that we're certainly going to continually monitor this, that we can continually modify, if you will, this level budget that we think is the best prudent and most fiscal cautious thing for us to really present to the board at this point. And we'll get into some of the details. So Logan, if you can, how do we do that? How do we balance that real budget gap now between last month, what we presented, and now? This is how we're looking at it. Almost all new spending that was proposed, it's now been subtracted from the budget that was proposed on March the 17th. We implemented in the current year as a caution a hiring freeze and the elimination of all non-essential spending effective March 19th. So there is a bit of hope there, that $150,000 in new revenue. But how do we do that and not be able to do the other things? Well, quite simply, we can't do currently the things that we wanted to do previously. And so subtracted from the budget now is the 3% cost of living adjustment. Subtracted from the budget is any new revenue to the schools. Subtracted is that new additional $200,000 in the CIP for the county, and then the additional $200,000 for the school CIP. All new positions subtracted now. And then in addition to that, we still can't balance that 3.1 deficit unless we make about another $1 million in cuts in various areas. We think we can get there. We think we can get there rather painlessly, although we're all feeling the pain. And I understand that. I understand county departments and county employees will feel this pain, as we all are sharing that, both in the private sector and the public sector. That's not to say that we can add these items back. As revenues come back, we can add these items back. And so a little bit more on that shortly. So what are the next steps? Certainly, we're going to monitor and evaluate the General Assembly budget amendments. We're anticipating revised state revenue projections from the schools and the comp board. The school budget adoption is required by May the 15th. That is required by Virginia Code, unless there are new projections that will come down from Richmond regarding school state revenue. If so, that will give us another 30 days to adopt the school budget. I will say we should not get hung up or concerned about that May 15 deadline. It is important we meet that. However, as in years past, we have adopted the school budget, level budget. We can always go back and add as revenues come back. If revenue is significantly less, we can look at other things as well. This board, of course, monies are not utilized in the budget until those monies are appropriated, and I'll talk a little bit about appropriations here shortly. So what we would look for this board to do, we think as our next step is, as the General Assembly meets tomorrow and as we know more next week, we really think that first week of May is critical for us to get back to this board with more detail in a modified budget. You've got the big picture, you've heard the big picture from me today, but we can get you down into the detail with the line items that first week of May. And then we can hold additional work sessions as needed. If we think we need more of those work sessions, we can do so. We would look to schedule the public hearing in late May or early June. We are required by code to adopt a county budget by June 30th. This year is a little unique for us in the fact that it's a reassessment year. We will need to hold a reassessment budget public hearing. We'll also need to hold the traditional tax rate hearing and also budget adoption. And so there's a lot of timing that's going on, and we'll go on with this, and we can work through that. We think time is on our side. However, we do feel that we need to get back with you as the board that first week in May when we know more about the state revenues at that point, and from the school system, quite frankly. Next slide.
Chris, may I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
The 157,000, that's based off of us keeping the reassessment money, keeping the tax rate at 61.
That's
right?
correct. Yes, sir.
So if we choose to not keep the reassessment money, we're looking at a 2.6 or 7 in the red.
That's correct. You would be looking at it. It would be an entire different conversation at that point, Mr. Mitchell. That's
so
correct.
Either huge cuts. So I mean, the health of the county depends on that reassessment money at this point.
That's correct. And this slide really speaks to a lot of that, Mr. Mitchell, if I may. Of course, adopted budgets are fluid. They can be amended as needed. We know we're going to continually assess the fiscal year 21 budget once it's adopted. And so when I say fluid, of course, we know if the revenue picture improves, we can add things back into the budget. If we have declining revenue, of course, that's going to require further budget reductions. To your point, Mr. Mitchell, if there's a sense either that when we talk about equalization, or if there are further significant revenue declines, and we really don't know that yet from the state and also with our real estate, that's going to necessitate a serious core service discussion with this board about county core services and associated operational level reductions and service eliminations from county operations. We don't think we're there today, but we are, I guess, sober if you will. It is sobering. I guess it's somber too, in that we have to monitor this. Again, if the U.S. economy rebounds, and as I stated earlier, if we were ever in a position to be in a good position for this to occur, it's now as the county. However, it's not to be taken lightly in terms of how significant it could be. We're confident we will work through it and get to where we need to be. Logan, and in that, you know, I started the presentation last month over a century ago, 1920. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about 1920 and 1918 and so forth. You know, my thought is those guys and gals, they did it over a century ago, and we will again.
Right.
And we will work through this. So that being said, I can answer any questions that the board may have at this point. Certainly want to thank the finance staff and really all county staff in working with the budget. But I will say, in terms of our next step, we really are looking at that 4th, 5th, 6th. I think it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in that first week of May. If that doesn't work, certainly we can look at that Thursday, Friday for the board as a time to get back together, and we can have more of that detail for the board. And I can answer any questions at this point, but this is a very high-level overview, but one that we had to have today for both your benefit, but also for those watching on our live stream today.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
I just had a question about, we was talking about schools. Have they posted any savings as far as not running school buses, having gas, tires, and electricity? Has anybody took that into consideration, the savings coming from, I know this is bad to say this, but at least from this pandemic, have they had any savings as far as not having expenses?
Excellent question, Mr. Cundiff. I do not know the answer to that. I haven't had that direct conversation with schools. Certainly, I know we will be hearing more from them in the coming weeks. I did have a brief conversation with Dr. Church earlier this morning, and of course, there's still uncertainties regarding the state revenues and where that may be, but that's an excellent question.
Thank you.
Mr. Cundiff, if I could piggyback on that, Mr. Mitchell and I had our routine meeting with the 2 school board representatives, and we questioned that very thing. And what we've asked for, at least in terms of our 2-on-2 meetings, I questioned those types of savings against any projected carryover number. And what Mr. Mitchell and I have asked for, if it's possible for the school to do, is to break those 2 numbers out so that we understand what is their operational carryover, you know, which would pretty much be pre-COVID-19. But then I'd like to see a number that represents savings as a result of the school closures. I hope that kind of helps you get to your question, which is a very good one, very good question. Mr. Whitlow, can I ask a quick question? With regard to the projections that you all, and fantastic work, by the way, I know this is difficult material. In your projections, are you considering any type of deficit from businesses and residents not being able to pay their taxes? Are we implementing or injecting any type of reduction percentage?
It is on the real estate ratio, again, reduction of 97 to about a 95% collection ratio on real estate. That would hold true for both both on the commercial side and the residential side. In terms of the sales and meals and occupancy, that is a general reduction. And most of those are what we refer to as trust taxes, which if you're buying the hamburger, you know, Chris is buying the hamburger, I'm paying the tax on that hamburger per se, and it's an entrust to the restaurant. And so less hamburgers means, of course, less for the county. Similarly, on transient occupancy as well, you pay that tax on that hotel room. It's not necessarily the hotel or the short-term rentals funds. They really belong to the county, paid by the citizen. It's just transferred through that. So there is no rhyme or reason to answer your question, I guess, Ms. Smith, in terms of are they going to be able to pay those specific, what I call trust taxes? That's what they are. But certainly on personal property, we haven't budgeted any growth for business in personal property. We're not necessarily budgeting any growth in real estate. Slight growth for this first quarter and so forth. But that collection, that 97% down to 95%, that's about $1 million hit. We hope that doesn't happen,
Right.
but we're planning on it.
Well, and I'm sure my colleagues up here can probably attest to this, but, I'm getting a lot of feedback from not only the constituents in my district, but from other districts who are quite concerned, being residential, tax-paying customers to the county, if you will, and also our small businesses. Trying to make rent, trying to meet payroll, in addition to all of the federal programs that are in place. So, I think the county, I look at things, and with a $157,000 cushion, which is not much of a cushion at all when it comes to operating the entire county, I wish we were in a better position, or if there were some type of remedies or help and assistance that we as a county could offer, whether it's in deadlines being extended or something like that. I just know that, I'm getting a lot of people that are very concerned, and rightfully so. So I'm concerned about that as well.
Sure. And I understand, Ms. Smith, excellent point. I will tell you, of course, the primary taxes of real estate and personal property, machinery and tools, our general taxes, are not due until December the 5th. We have not fully implemented the twice a year, tax collection. That will be a couple of years from now after everything's programmed. And so, as an example, those taxes will not necessarily be June, they'll be due in December. And so, but I am mindful of that. It does give that's why I said earlier, if there was going to hit at a good time, it hit now. It does give us, in businesses and our citizens, that window, if you will, that would certainly be compressed, had the situation been different. But I certainly understand, what you're saying, certainly, and at the state level too, because I know the state deferral of the income tax will have a significant effect on the state budget. And of course, our colleagues and your colleagues really around Virginia are all wrestling with this matter. I mean, everyone's wrestling with it, but certainly see your point. I will say, in terms of the federal stimulus, from what we know, Virginia will receive approximately $150 billion from the stimulus to help the state and the localities. In direct payment, it only is applicable to counties with 500,000 residents or more. There's only one in Virginia, and that's Fairfax County. However, that's not to say the balance of those funds, and Fairfax County may look to receive several $1 million. And this is all on news articles and information I'm reading, so I'm not the expert. But I will say that funds, though, are there for the other localities. What is not known, and what has been signaled to us early on by VACO and others, is that the federal stimulus dollars cannot be used to supplant the loss of local revenue. And so they can only be used for things such as the crisis, to be reimbursed, if you will, for our COVID expenditures. And we've had some, and we're working through that. There's a lot of discussion in Washington now regarding another stimulus for state and localities to address that very thing that I just mentioned, that localities, and certainly far more really than Franklin, will be in a situation maybe more hurtful than us. And so I know the discussions are ongoing in Washington. Is there another stimulus that may be coming to help the states and the localities deal with that loss of the local tax revenue dollars? Because quite frankly, what the federal government sometimes forgets is that localities and states, as I mentioned earlier, have to have a balanced budget. We cannot print money. And so they may forget that in Washington from time to time. So anyway, I've belabored that point, but I hope that gave you a little bit of insight.
Chris, I think this 10% drop in sales taxes is optimistic at best. We've got small businesses here that have been closed for 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. They're not generating any money. Moving forward with our discussion coming up in these budgets, I would like for you and Mr. Carter to look at money we have in capital improvement projects that are way out and see if we can tap into some of these resources.
Sure. We can do that, Mr. Carter, and your point's very well made. Again, no rhyme or reason for any of these projection percentage reductions and so forth. As Mr. Carter, Brian Carter mentioned earlier, the 10% reduction, it truly is more of a 15% reduction because we were just seeing, if you all recall, the last couple of fiscal years, that really, really high sales tax. We saw almost double-digit increases the last couple of years. We were still projecting a really healthy increase for next year, and the first quarter was still looking really, really good for us. But your point's well made that to take a look at that again. To your question regarding capital, of course, capital funds are funds set aside for one-time expenditures. And of course, the financial advisors and lending institutions and credit rating agencies, they really tell us in, I guess, finance school and so forth, to shy away from using one-time funds for ongoing expenses. That's not to say that that cannot be done in certainly times like these, because a lot of localities have to resort sometimes to go there. But what I will say, we can look at those things, and I will say any reduction in capital spending or a project, certainly if it's diverted to an operational expenditure or another capital project, and that's all discussions that the board can have. What I will say, once those funds are deducted from capital, maintenance, and so forth, the next fiscal year's budget or the following fiscal year's budget, it does make it harder to put back. It's not to say that you can't put it back, and it may be in a point in time that you can put it back, but to put such dollars back when it's reduced likely requires you to find additional revenue, which may mean looking at rates in the future. But we certainly will look at that, Mr. Carter. I think it's an excellent.
I think this board is tasked with protecting the citizens of Franklin County.
Yes, sir.
Rainy days are here. People are going to need help now more than ever. And I think as a board, we're going to have to step up to the plate, and tough decisions are going to have to be made moving forward.
No question. No question.
I agree with Mr. Carter. We've got a whole lot ahead of us.
No question.
Yep. If we got money set aside for capital projects, we need to use that for operating to help our citizens with taxes and additional taxes. I would also be on board with that.
But it does leave a cap in your next year's taxes.
It does, and then of course the rating agencies, in terms of our bond rating, they really shy governments away from that. That's, because you're really, but it's not to say, like I say, in times of a rainy day, if we get to that point. What I will say, the approach that we're recommending is really this strategic pause of, we need to monitor this matter very closely every month, really every quarter. And so in July, we'll have more information. In October, we'll have more information. And by all means, we're hoping that, this is a bump, although I think it's a rather large bump in the road, and that things will continue to rebound. But we're not going to know that today. And so for us to assume what we presented to you on March 17th is not realistic. And that's why we wanted to get before you today and really have a more detailed discussion with you at a work session. So all excellent feedback from the board.
We thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. So if I may, on that, and we don't have to do this now, Mr. Chairman, but we can reach out to the board to see what day and times work best for each of you. I know Mr. Thompson's probably dialed in remotely, and I think he's been on and off the phone today with some other medical needs and so forth for his family. So that being said, we can poll the board as to your availability, or if the board wants to do so now, that's just your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, that'll work fine.
Okay. I just had a couple of other items, upcoming events, certainly that work session, and then other matters. And if I may, I've talked some about the negatives today, and I don't like to necessarily leave a meeting with some of the negatives. I think it's important to talk a lot about the positives and so forth. And so
well, I still say if they ever turn us loose, we're gonna go wild. I'm ready to go to the beach now and rub my toes in salt water.
I'll ask our clerk to pass these along. And of course, staff put this together. Appreciate staff collecting this information. Mike Burnett from the various departments. I wanted to share a little bit about the county's COVID response, because I know in the community, a lot of times the community may hear some things as to what the county is doing, and a lot of times maybe folks are unaware. So I think it's important for you as the board to have this information. Of course, early on in March, I guess it was the first week in March, we really saw this thing starting to materialize, and so we developed a COVID task force, knowing that we needed to get our emergency managers together, led by Billy Ferguson, the public safety director, as well as all of our community partners, the health department, and so forth. And so by the second week of March, we had actually held really one of the first in the state. I think we had the health department here, Dr. Gately, who hosted a meeting on COVID and what it is and what it's not and how to prepare for it. That was very beneficial that second week of March. And then, of course, that third week, we started holding daily briefings with our COVID task force. Even on Saturdays and Sundays, we all have a 3 o'clock call, and well over 200 people have been participating, everyone from the United Way to all of our public safety staff and agencies, county departments, our school system, just a host of people that have been part of that task force, the health department, and so forth. And so we wanted to share a little bit about what the county's been doing, and this is just a few items from the various county departments. I'm not going to read every one in our development services area. They worked very hard in GIS and planning and building, certainly to keep that operation running under locked, if you will, counters, and still able to serve the citizens from behind the door, if you will. Staff has reached out with our state partners through CDBG funding, working with things like the Tri-Area Community Health on telemedicine, if there are grants for them, securing some money for senior meals. In addition, working really with the school system, Chantel, to increase broadband where they can at times with our school system and rates to help people, that kids doing homework. Our office, again, continually, Madeline has done an excellent job working on our COVID response page on the county's website, social media postings, etc. Our IT department, our meeting today and last month being live streamed, and all the telework projects that they have done. The library certainly continues offering services. They're making library cards for those who do not already have one or access one in the county, and encouraging that. They have a host of classes and online materials through all of their resources and digital media that they're promoting. In addition, they have a 3D printer at the library. You probably have seen some of this on the television of some of the other localities. We started printing 3D face shields for the public safety office with our 3D printer at the library. And so some very creative things that are going on, Mr. Chairman. Our Family Resource Center, which is our Center for Domestic Violence, they've developed a 24/7 hotline in times of domestic violence for people to have resources to. They're available 24/7. General Properties often are unsung heroes that really keep things in this building and other buildings running and in tip-top shape, cleaning the surfaces. I will tell you, the government center and county facilities have never looked so clean and have been so clean. So a lot of work there, and also providing our drop boxes for county citizens. Finance department, things that you wouldn't think of. There's been an enormous amount of legislation since COVID. in the last 8 weeks. The Family First Act, working with the county attorney. I did not want to leave out Jim Gwynn, who's done an excellent job working with county finance on really getting all that in place, because that is protection, family medical leave protection for citizens that are impacted or employees impacted by COVID. In addition, I know Brian regularly participates on a statewide call on economic forecasting and finance. Public safety really has been the lead agency, really coordinating all of our emergency efforts with FEMA, all of our reimbursements. Mr. Ferguson, Chief Ferguson, and his staff continually working on that. They've on our daily COVID calls. We really started to realize from partners, nonprofits in the community, that our food pantries were in a position, as an example, our soup kitchen, it's not only running low on supplies for those in need, but also by the fact that many of those services were offered by seniors. And those seniors in a very vulnerable group could no longer volunteer their time. So we found a way, and I can't applaud Franklin County businesses enough. Some have stepped forward in just a great way, working with Next Haul Trailers, Proline Trailers, and all of the efforts that you see, working with United Way to deliver meals and foods. Same with social services, worked with I think aging services and parks and recreation, as well as family resources, and developed a senior care initiative where our aging services department, they're contacting over 100 seniors each week to make sure that they're okay and they're having the supplies and things in their homes that they need during this time. In addition, partnered with Domino's Pizza and some others to, again, get hot meals into certain areas. Economic development, I'll mention there. Mike Burnett, I requested Mike several weeks ago to develop a work team to really address the business needs in the community. And Mike really has done an excellent job in developing a business resource page on the county's website, continually monitoring the SBA and all the federal stimulus dollars for our small businesses. In addition, we partner with Virginia Career Works on a grant program. We're able to assist several Franklin County businesses in that. Our sheriff, who may still be with us here, and see him and staff, Mr. Sigmund in the back there, they've done an excellent job putting their contingency plans in place, things that we normally would not think about. Our inmates at the jail, very critical population, in keeping them safe, and working through dispatch on varying levels of how to dispatch in a COVID or a pandemic crisis. Similarly, for our Commonwealth's attorney, who's worked with the courts on rescheduling a host of cases. The registrar doing an excellent job. We know the General Assembly will likely meet tomorrow and could delay the primary, and following, certainly the May elections have been delayed. That's been an enormous effort on the registrar's office in terms of making sure this November that they're going to be ready. And I've already mentioned social services and their team, and Parks and Recreation would not want to leave them out, and all they're working with aging services. Some of their programming went from the Easter egg hunt that used to be held at Wade Park. They actually did a pop-up Easter egg hunt for families, surprised them on a Saturday. The Easter Bunny showed up at some of our nursing centers and got to wave through the window and provide some Easter cheer. Again, I could not be more proud of our staff and what they're doing during this time. We know we've got tough decisions ahead of us. But again, I said it before, I think I've said it many times, I call it good Franklin County grit, that mental toughness that really it's going to take for each of us. And I applaud you as the board in the support that you have provided us as staff through this. So I have belabored that, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies. I did not mean to be that long-winded, but I thought we needed to share some of the positives here. And I will say on a couple of other matters, and I will certainly give the floor back to you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of matters. We do not have a closed session today on the agenda, though we will need some board appointments coming for June. I know there are some planning commission appointments coming up and recreation commission and so forth. We still have time, so that's not on your agenda today. We haven't forgot that. So we'll look at that in the month of May if that's okay. And then in addition, I think I shared with the board in a communication, we are moving forward. In February, the board approved us to go and receive proposals for architectural and engineering services for the Glade Hill Fire Station project that's been now in the works for several years. Of course, that money is secure, borrowed and set aside. And so the next step from that, and we have held some online interviews, if you will, with those firms, and we'll be making a recommendation to the board, to you all on a contract for final design and plans at a future board meeting, unless I hear any other direction from this board. Again, we're not necessarily asking for that project to be bid at this point, but we do know that project needs to keep that project in the queue. The final drawings have to be completed at some point. So if, again, hearing no objection from this board, we will work with the selected firm and bring something back to you for consideration. We're not asking for anything today. So those are my long-winded items, and I probably have a lot of other things that I've missed. But
I've got a quick comment about the Glade Hill Fire Station.
Yes, sir.
We've got about 2.9 million roughly set aside.
Correct.
With what's going on right now, I really think we need to try to stick to not going over that. The $4.65 million that some of these firms are projecting, I don't know if I can support spending more than $3 million on a fire station with what drawings I've seen and living in some of these fire stations through my career. $3 million is a lot of money to build a rural fire station. There's a lot of talk. I know I'm a member at Glade Hill Fire Department, talking to some of the fellow members. Some of them think that the public think that they're the ones wanting to spend $4.65 million on this fire station, and they're catching some heat from the public too. So as a member, they asked me to just say, hey, let's try to keep it no more than what we've set aside for it. And if we can come in under, that would be even better. That would be the only input I would give you.
Sure, and we can pass that along to the architect and engineer, and that's very helpful information. It may, I'm not sure, it may require modifications to the design and this, that, and the other, more of the creative ways of getting to the number.
And I'd like for us to go back to asking Glade Hill Volunteer Fire Department a little bit more of their input as well.
Sure.
So I would really like to see that. I know it's the public safety paid staff, it's living quarters for them,
Correct.
But it's still Glade Hill Volunteer Fire Department.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I can assure you the Glade Hill Fire Department wants to go forward. You don't know how many calls I get about this. Matter of fact, I just attended the one.
It's not that they don't want to go forward.
One of the suppers that they had. And one of the biggest things is, when are you going to do it? We've waited. It's been 4 years now.
Right.
When
They just don't want to spend $4 or $5 million on it.
Well,
That's what I'm saying.
I can understand that point, but I don't want to do anything to stop it right now. I want to go ahead and do the bids, get stuff lined up so we know what they're going to say, what it costs and stuff like that. And even when we get the bids in on the architectural things, we need to put it up for bids and find out what the actual cost is going to be. Then I think that's when we should take a look at it.
Absolutely. I'm just saying
Okay.
the $3 million that's been set aside.
I fought for that thing for a long time. I took a lot of heat, and I'm not going to let it die.
I don't want it to die either. But
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Whitlow, just a point of clarification, if I may.
Sure.
The RFPs that have been done and we're moving forward, at what point would you say that the board needs to visit what we're speccing for that project? Because that will have everything to do with the responsiveness to the bids.
Sure. Well, what I'll tell you is the preliminary engineering, of course, there are preliminary estimates, and in terms of the project design and scope, as shared in February, it was between $4.5 million. That's about on 11,000 square foot facility. And of course, a lot of the cost in that has been shared is, of course, site development. There's stormwater requirements that we have in 2020 that we did not have in 2014. The state, of course, changed stormwater on us in 2014. for stormwater retention and detention and so forth. That was one large factor in that cost. The other factor that we have today that we did not have a couple of decades ago really are the revised building codes of today, which are much more stringent. But then more recently, in the last 5 years, the concern, and really the rightful concern, quite frankly, for carcinogens in terms of fire stations, in terms of protecting firefighters, both career and volunteer. And so a lot of those costs were in that preliminary estimate. But to your question, Ms. Smith, about at what point in terms of specs and so forth, the RFP, the request for proposals, is really to decide on the engineer who will do the final design for the final drawings. And so this board will not be asked to move forward, if you will, to put the project out to bid until that final design is completed. This board will be asked first and foremost to move forward with hiring the engineer at a contract price. And so staff, again, from the February meeting, following the selection of the firm, is to bring you all back a contract with that engineering firm to do the final drawings. And so final drawings, of course, at that point, during the final drawings and during that discussion, the discussion of the budget and the amount that the county has and the final design certainly can be laid out to that engineer. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, I'm understanding that the board is gonna wanna look at the scope and the cost of the project and how it's being spec'd out, because we've got to get in front of the spec piece, with the bids.
Sure.
Because they'll be responsive to how we spec the project.
Before the final design. Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I'm not trying to, you asked for input. With the current budget constraints, I think $3 million should be enough to build a really nice fire station.
Well, one of the things everybody's missing is number two, it's going to be two buildings there. You're going to have two entities in that building. You're going to have a rescue squad and you're going to have a fire department. And every time it's brought up, it's always just the fire department. And don't get me wrong, it's a good place for it. It's an excellent place for it. But a lot of people miss the point that the rescue squad is going to be there too. So when we talk about the money, you got to remember we're putting two entities into that building. And I don't think that's always stressed and brought out.
Right.
That there's going to be two entities in that building. And then again, you got to build not only for the fire department, you got to build for the rescue squad. I mean, they got specs that they got to go through too.
I understand.
And so, I just want to clarify that, it's two entities going in that building.
And that's an excellent reminder and clarification, Mr. Cohn. If you're correct. It is a building to serve both career paramedics and volunteer fire personnel. And then, I'm sure other entities, if they need a place to use the facility, if a sheriff's deputy, as an example, needed, I guess, to make a phone call or to check an email. Again, it's a multifunctional, I guess, facility, and sometimes, like you said, that maybe that is lost.
It's just like Mr. Taylor and I was talking about one time about if there's a disaster, you can fall back on that building, to help people.
Yeah.
So it's several different points to it, and I'm not trying to chastise anybody. Please,
You're not, brother. I was asked to make a couple comments from the members.
But,
that's
like
all
I
I'm
said,
doing.
I just want to reiterate that it's got two entities going into that building. So, but anyway.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I did not have any other items, and I apologize for being long-winded. It's been a while since we've been together as a group.
It's fine, thank you, and we appreciate staff and everyone's efforts to put a budget together or to redo the budget to where we can modify and hopefully move forward without a lot of disruptions. And I think y'all have done an excellent job, and we appreciate it.
I think we'll put our county against anybody as far as the staffing, what's happened, what's going on, how good and kind we treat each other. And like I said, y'all do a wonderful job from the sheriff's department, from the volunteers, rescue squads. I mean, paid people. You can't ask for any county any better. I don't care what anybody says. You can't ask for any county any better. And I just want to say that, and I really appreciate everybody for what they've done.
I agree with Mr. Cundiff 110%, and I just want to compliment staff on their hard work, and then the sheriff and Major Siemens here. Let your people know we really appreciate the hard work they're doing. I spoke to Director Ferguson today. I told him the same thing. You know, those men and women are on the front line for the county. And please let your people know it looks like some dire times. You know, we were hoping to be able to have a decent cost of living raise this year and be able to take care. And, you know, we're not ruling it out, but we haven't forgotten about them. But we have to be real about it. You know, it's some trying times, and you know, we're gonna work together. We're gonna get through it, and you know, there's a brighter day coming. We just have to suck it up and go and move forward and use that Franklin County grit, as Chris says. And I appreciate all you people, all you guys, men and women, for what you do for our county as well. I'll still put Franklin County up. I still call it God's country for a reason. And, you know, it's still a great place to live. But, you know, we're seeing tough times. I'll share with you the college, Ferrum College is seeing some tough times that they're trying to work through. You know, businesses are hurting, and we need to keep that in consideration. You know, individuals are hurting, and, you know, we're all in this together. You know, we'll get there. But again, thank you to all you, and to let your people know, please.
There's an old saying that if you can't have all the hog on the table, just be proud you got some of it there.
Well,
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, other matters.
The money is already there. We don't really need to vote on it, but can we get the washing machine so our firefighters can wash their gear? I know Rocky Mount Fire Department has offered to put it in their station, so it's centrally located at the current time, so everybody can come to Rocky Mount and wash their gear as needed. I think it's roughly 40,000, Chris. I would like to see us go ahead and get that. We had 2 pretty bad fires this past weekend. There's a lot of these guys have nowhere to wash their gear. You were talking about carcinogens. Well, that's where they come from. That's what's killing the firefighters. There is some good to come out of COVID-19. And one thing I would like the staff to keep an eye on is these really low interest loans where we could use it for Glade Hill Fire Station, tanker trucks, capital projects, trash trucks, sheriff's vehicles. There's going to be a lot of stuff, a lot of good that comes from this that we can take advantage of. I really want to keep a close eye on that. From what I understand, the town of Rocky Mount's looking to take advantage of it as well. A quick update on the state troopers. They were given 1 trooper from Floyd County, but it's temporary. That's only till November. So they didn't really get the relief, and they're expected to have as many as 250 state troopers retire next fiscal year. So it sounds like it's going to get even worse.
How many did you say? I'm sorry.
Talking to the major in Chesterfield, he says there could be as many as 250 retire next fiscal year. So let's keep a close eye on those really low interest loans that they're going to be given to localities. You know, we need 3 or 4 fire trucks. The sheriff's always needs stuff. Don needs trash trucks. We really want to keep a close eye on that. Try to take advantage of it. With our bond rating, we should be able to get some really good loans. I know we're talking about budget constraints. The volunteer fire departments, it would be really nice if somewhere in there we can find just a little bit extra for them for their operating. If it doesn't happen this fiscal year, I definitely want us to keep an eye on it. And as we move forward, Brian and Chris, I know we got the doom and gloom situation that was presented today. I'd really like to keep a very optimistic budget, if you want to call it that, as well. Some, here's what we're focused on now, but I really agree with Mr. Cuniff. Let's try to stay optimistic. I think that'd be really good. That was all. The extractor was the biggest thing. We really need that so we can wash our gear. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other matters, anyone here with a public comment? If not, we'll recess to a later date, which someone needs to give me.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned, we would look to do a work session that May 4th, 5th, or 6th, and so we'll really need to poll the board to your time and your availability. And we can do that. We can adjourn now, and then we can make sure we poll each of you, and once that's set, we can convene a budget work session if that works.
Okay, fine.
We'll reach out to each of you individually and your calendars and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. And we are recessed.
Hey, don't forget your presents.
I won't.